Just yesterday, bro. Cozy in my bed, I was simply an ordinary guy, doom scrolling on my phone. Today, I've turned into a skeleton, a full-on walking skeleton, stripped of all skin and muscles. And honestly, devoid of pretty much everything else, just pure bones, baby. Some medieval-looking realm is where I got yanked and transmigrated, with zero warning beforehand and zero prep time. But hey, at least I unlocked a sick power called Dead Sovereign. That sounds low-key badass, right? The dead can be resurrected by me to form skeleton minions. Plus, whenever they level up, my own power gets a boost too. Future version of me is going to be wildly overpowered. So, naturally, tracking down a graveyard was my very first move. Striking my most dramatic pose there, with arms thrown wide and full Chinibu energy, shouting out, "Rise, my servant," and it actually worked. A bony hand punched straight up through the dirt. And crawling out came the absolute saddest skeleton I've ever laid eyes on, with yellow bones and wobbly joints. It looked like a single sneeze nearby would shatter the poor thing. Skeleton number 1 became his name, my very first employee and my entire army combined. Then a sudden scream rang out right behind me. "What are you doing to my father?" Some random villager had just showed up carrying flowers to visit his dad's grave, and what did his eyes meet? Me, an actual skeleton, hovering over the freshly dug-up burial site of his old man, while his father's corpse was now strolling around as my fresh, undead minion. Okay, I can totally see how bad this looks. I threw my arms open wide, in what I genuinely thought was a friendly gesture, and tried to reason with him, "My friend. This is all just a major misunderstanding. Your father is the one who called me here, and I just hooked him up with a brand new life, but here's the catch. Being a skeleton means I'm completely lacking lips. And I've got no tongue either. All this guy witnessed was a scary bone monster going clack, clack, clack with its jaw, all while spreading its arms out like it was flexing on him. Naturally, he assumed I was trash-talking him, and he went absolutely nuclear, slamming his bouquet down onto the ground, with flower petals scattering everywhere, his face flaring up bright red like a tomato about to blow. Not gonna cap, keeping it real with you. I'm currently the absolute weakest entity in existence, dead or alive. Even a low-key, aggressive chihuahua could totally wreck my whole career. Right now, this furious local dude would turn me into dust with a single punch. So I did what any absolute genius would do, by grabbing skeleton number 1 right by the neck, and lifting him up like a hostage, like, "Sir, you wouldn't want your dad's head." Going on a totally separate adventure. Would you? I even flashed a throat-slit sign across number 1's neck using my finger bone. Super clear, totally cinematic vibes. That specific part was understood. He paused for roughly 2 seconds flat. Then he got even more pissed and charged at me. Like an absolute mad bull, language barrier. We seriously have a language barrier. BRO. Number 1's neck was grabbed as I sprinted at full speed, achieving maximum bone velocity, my leg bones moving so blurrily fast that after images were probably left behind. Just picture this cinematic sunset scene. One furious villager is chasing a sprinting skeleton across an open hillside, while that same skeleton is carrying yet another skeleton by the throat. The carried skeleton is just flapping completely horizontally in the breeze, like a broken white flag with all its limbs flopping everywhere. Truly gorgeous, a prime moment of youth and vitality. This guy apparently possessed infinite stamina, since stopping his chase was simply not an option. My sole advantage is that undead simply never get tired, as long as my stamina bar outlasts his. This marathon is totally mine, but then a random dog popped out of the bushes right ahead of me. My left foot tripped up and caught my right foot, sending my entire skeletal frame flying forward through the air. Instinctively, number 1 was hurled ahead of me to act as a crash pad. Splat! Number 1 slammed into the ground and exploded into tiny fragments, with bones just scattering all over the place. My one and only asset, my whole net worth, was completely shattered. The villager was only 10 meters away and closing in fast. Scrambling on all fours, I scooped up bones like an absolute maniac. Skull, got it. Ribs, got it. Leg bones, got it. Arm. Wait, where's the arm? Forget the arm. My pile of loose bones was pulled tight into a desperate hug, and I bolted right into the deep woods, acting like my afterlife was actually on the line. Because let's be real, it totally was. Every tight gap between trunks became my escape route. Every low-hanging bush was dodged, and any narrow crack my scrawny frame could squeeze through was conquered. Turns out being a walking skeleton finally had its perks, seeing as I was totally aerodynamic and compact. The shouting echoing behind me began to fade, getting softer and softer until it vanished. Against a rough bar trunk, I collapsed, dumping my armload of random bones straight onto the dirt. Right then, my soul fire flickered erratically like a candle in a hurricane. No wonder every fantasy novel out there swears. Being a necromancer is a high-risk career choice. Down at my feet lay a chaotic pile of scattered bones. Skeleton number 1 had officially become a pile of bones. With a heavy sigh, I kicked off my impossible jigsaw puzzle. Day 1 of my reign as an undead sovereign was honestly off to an absolute clown show of a start. Time to piece this tragic Humpty Dumpty back together again. Skull clicked in, spine gave a satisfying snap. Snap and snap. Stacking each vertebra one by one, then sorting the ribs. Left side separate from the right side. Crucial rule, do not mix them up, pelvis locked firmly in place. Legs reattached, and skeleton number 1 finally stood upright. Missing his entire left arm, but hey, nobody's vibe is flawless. Pacing around him, I conducted a thorough quality inspection. He was functional enough to get the job done. Employee performance review gets a solid pass. Next up on the agenda was establishing clear comms with my one and only loyal subordinate, keeping it simple with some basic commands. Outstretched came my hand, featuring 5 neat finger bones. Come on, buddy, let's make it official. Number 1 tilted his hollow skull sideways in confusion. His internal soul fire flickered erratically, looking like a brain trying to process thoughts on a potato-powered CPU. Then he moved, lifting a bony arm into the air. Though completely missing my hand, he reached right behind his own skull, clutched it tight, and popped his own head clean off with a soft mechanical click. Then, he gently dropped his skull right into my open palm, as casual as handing someone a basketball. Frozen in place, I stood there clutching his severed head, while his empty eye sockets stared blankly back up at me. Down at him stared my hollow eye sockets, like 4 pitch-black, menacing voids. Deep within the midnight forest, an awkward silence settled heavy in the air. Onto his neck, I effortlessly popped his skull right back where it belonged. A satisfying click confirmed the absolute perfection of the fit. Behold, the official head delivery ceremony, meaning orientation is officially crushed. Against his bone-dry forehead, I gave him a solid pat. Throw away the boring training manual because of that crisp clacking sound. Straight into field exercises is where we are heading now. Off the damp ground, I snatched a dead branch. Snapping it right down the middle, I kept the longer piece for myself. Not gonna lie, it actually felt pretty legit with some nice weight. Boasting a solid length, my brand new caveman weapon was officially acquired. Straight into the gloomy forest shadows, I launched myself with zero hesitation. Here's the lowdown on rocking the skeleton lifestyle. Forget having a heartbeat or wasting time breathing. Absolute zero body heat to worry about. Only a tiny, subtle click breaks my total silence. Echoing from my skeletal joints inside the pitch-black woods, that's the only sound. Practically invisible to the world, I stroll back just 30 seconds later, clutching a squirming rabbit firmly by its long ears. Still kicking hard and ridiculously alive. And honestly, looking super pressed about its current predicament. Right out toward number 1, I thrust the creature. Time to end this quick and clean, as number 1 received the order loud and clear. Deep inside his skull, the soul fire flickered wildly while processing the command. Outstretched came his bony, skeletal fingers, giving the confused rabbit a gentle, curious poke. Following up with another poke, he was basically treating the animal to a spa day. Totally annoyed by now, the rabbit snapped, kicking his finger clean off his hand with zero hesitation. Quietly watching the whole fiasco, number 1 picked up his detached digit, plugging it back into its socket. He geared up to resume round 2 of the unexpected bunny spa treatment. Deep within my non-existent soul, I let out a massive, silent sigh. Looks like some good old-fashioned hands-on teaching is mandatory here. Firmly, I gripped his wrist, guiding his stiff hand directly around the frantic rabbit's neck. Squeeze, crack, and just like that, the poor rabbit went completely limp and lifeless. My attention instantly locked onto our glowing soul link. A microscopic wisp of pure energy drifted away from the fallen rabbit, flowing right through number 1 before finally reaching my burning soul fire. And then, absolutely nothing happened, leaving me hanging. It felt just like dropping a single tiny teardrop straight into the massive Sahara Desert. Didn't even cause a tiny splash, let alone a wave. Seriously, the efficiency here is absolute garbage. Could the specific energy source actually be the main issue? Do we really have to strictly farm undead creatures or random humans? Constantly digging up old graves sounds exhausting, and holding up people on the highway forever isn't a sustainable business model. All these thoughts spiraled while I was deep inside my existential crisis. Right beside me, a sudden click-click sound echoed out of nowhere, as number one managed to snag himself a stick, and straight up started low-key copying my solo hunting routine by mimicking my previous moves step by step, with totally stiff legs and zero coordination at all, giving off major baby deer on ice skates vibes. Right when a squirrel sprinted past him, he chased after it, though he couldn't even touch its tail. Spotted a random rabbit next, and tried to pounce on it, only to trip over his own 2 feet, and almost fly apart all over again. Yet this absolute mad lad refused to quit, just keeping on swinging that random stick at empty bushes, over and over and over with zero brainpower, and zero strategy, fueled purely by stubborn dedication. Then the universe literally decided to throw him a bone right there, as a squirrel leaped across the gap from one tree to another. Its mid-air trajectory ended up intersecting right at the exact spot where number one was blindly flailing his stick. Whack. The poor squirrel pinwheeled helplessly through the sky, crashed onto the dirt, twitched twice, and flat-out flatlined. Number one froze completely as his soul fire flared up way brighter. He strolled over and poked the fallen creature with his stick, getting zero response because it was totally dead. Carefully dropping his weapon to the side, he scooped up the squirrel with his single arm, whirled around, and marched straight back toward me at a notably faster pace. Holding out the prize, he clacked his jaw at me triumphantly, acting like an absolute house cat dropping off. A fresh dead bird at your feet. Bro is giving major employee of the month energy right here. And that exact second is when it hit us. The psychic link connecting us suddenly erupted with crazy energy, pulsing 100 times harder than the rabbit incident, and flooding my consciousness with 1,000 times pure signals. Skeleton number one had officially smashed past his hard limits, completing his first independent hunt to trigger an evolution, as all prerequisites were finally met with flying colors. Staring down at the lifeless squirrel, then over at number one and back again, I realized this was the ultimate hidden secret all along. It's not merely about racking up kills, nor is it about just absorbing juice. It is entirely about the ceiling. Just like an infant taking those monumental first steps, or a toddler uttering their very first word out loud. Totally flying solo, number one just pulled off his very first independent feat. The boy caught on by copying and soaked up the lesson. Completely on his own 2 feet, he made it happen. That initial breakthrough serves as the master key unlocking total evolution. While the barrier to entry is shockingly low, low-key low, engineering these massive upgrades is totally in my wheelhouse. Crafting a custom tutorial system and pumping them out on a mass scale. Inside my chest, my soul fire was raging wild like a rave bonfire. A loud, eerie creaking sound echoed as number one's bones began to grow, stretching outward and expanding rapidly. His entire physique shot up in height and bulked out. Once the growth finally settled, he stood half a head taller than me, though his missing left arm remained absent. A brand new weapon had suddenly manifested in his right grip. It was a sleek short sword carved entirely from pure bone. Both the blade and the handle formed one single solid piece, carrying that exact same polished gleam as his skeleton frame. Leveling up successfully, skeleton number one evolved into a tier 1 skeleton soldier. That sudden shift pulsed directly through our psychic link, bracing him with stronger bones and a way harder frame, and packing a much more intense soul. So, if that angry, flower-carrying village dude rolled up right now, number one could clap him without breaking a sweat. My gaze locked onto my creation, my absolute masterpiece, and my very first successful employee. Even after surviving a super rocky onboarding phase, a crystal clear thought flashed across my skull. I seriously need way more number ones. An ultimate undead apocalypse master plan is cooking right now, ladies and gentlemen. And it is kicking off right here in this tiny, quiet forest, armed with just a single skeleton, one dead squirrel, and an absolute mountain of ambition. The exact second number one wrapped up his evolution. A powerful wave of energy surged backward, streaming through our soul link, and slamming with full force straight into my inner soul fire. That once flickering little candle flame of mine suddenly locked in, stabilized, and beamed way brighter. My own bones beefed up too as I flexed my rattling finger bones, producing a much deeper clicking echo. Look, previously I barely packed the physical strength of a single chihuahua, whereas now I'm easily pushing 2 chihuahuas, maybe even 2.5. Sure, it might look like a microscopic upgrade, but I can totally crunch the numbers here. Just one single skeleton leveling up fed me this massive amount of power. So imagine what 100 or 1,000 could do. We are talking pure exponential growth, baby. It is literally compound interest, but for dark necromancy. Still, step number 1 means I gotta gather way more raw materials first. More bones can I go back to that village. Let me think I dug up a man's father, turned him into a zombie puppet, used said zombie puppet as a hostage, then smashed him into pieces, and ran away with the parts. You know that bridge isn't just burned. It's been nuked from orbit. We're never going back there. I looked deeper into the forest instead. Ever since I got transmigrated, I felt this weird comfort in here. The air itself was feeding my soul fire, like a spa day for undead. I didn't dare go deep before, because I was basically a walking chew toy. One slightly motivated forest creature, and I'd be done. But now I have number 1. Tier 1 skeleton soldier, bone, sword-wielding. Village man, fighting capable. Number 1 take point. He immediately marched ahead. His steps were way more solid now. One arm, holding that bone sword in a proper combat stance. He actually looked cool. My boy grew up so fast. I followed behind at a safe distance. One skeleton up front as meat. Shield and scout, one skeleton in the back as commander. Sun Tzu would be proud probably. The forest got darker. Thick canopy blocking the moonlight. Rotting leaves carpeting the ground. The air smelled like dirt and decay. I loved that my soul fire was practically purring. Then number 1 stopped. He turned halfway, raised his sword slightly. Dangerous signal low. We're doing tactical communication now. When did you learn that I dropped low behind a tree? Everything went quiet, just whined through leaves. Then I felt at eyes. Multiple sets green dots lit up in the darkness. 1 pair, 2 pairs, 3. For wolves. 4 wolves surrounding us from different directions. Low growls drool, dripping from fangs. Bodies pressed to the ground in attack position. Their target was number 1, standing right in the middle of the path. Through their primal predator minds, a massive, bizarre, bone-shaped chew toy was what they saw. Totally low-key prey. Oh boys. You guys have zero clue as I stayed low in the shadows. This was basically number 1's annual performance review. Time to prove what that evolution upgrade was actually worth. The first aggressive wolf completely lost its patience. A sudden lunge was launched straight at number 1's flank, aiming straight for the leg bones in a classic takedown strategy. Number 1 didn't even bother to dodge or flinch at all. His torso simply twisted around, bringing that lethal bone blade swinging down. In one brutal, flawless overhead chop snap, the beast's skull was completely caved in midair. It hung frozen, suspended in the breeze for a split second, then dropped heavily like a sack of bricks. A double twitch, and it was totally lights out. Absolute 1-hit, 1-kill dominance. That's my boy right there while the other 3 slammed on the brakes. Their glowing green eyes shifted instantly from dinner time to wait what. Number 1 wasn't giving them any space to reconsider. An aggressive charge was sent straight at the closest beast. Snarling loudly, it lunged forward with massive jaws wide open. Numero 1 expertly sidestepped at the very last second and swept his heavy sword horizontally across. Crack, connecting hard against the creature's front legs. It let out a piercing howl and crashed into the dirt. Before it could even process trying to stand back up, number 1 was already towering right above it. His bone sword raised high into the air and drove it straight down through its neck. 2 down, leaving the final pair of wolves to finally figure out the terrifying situation. This creepy bone guy is definitely not a chew toy. This bone guy is basically a human blender. They exchanged quick panic glances and made the absolute smartest survival call of their careers. Time to bounce. Don't let those cowards escape. That direct command was zapped straight through our soul link. Number 1 picked up the signal instantly and sprinted hard after one of the fleeing cowards. Here is the absolute best flex about having undead minions. They literally never get tired ever. That desperate wolf was running with every ounce of remaining energy, completely burning through its stamina bar, while number one maintained that exact same effortless pace, totally unstoppable and relentlessly consistent, operating like a terrifying skeleton-shaped Terminator. He closed the gap fast, skipping all the extra flashy moves this time, shoving its bone blade deep into the beast's spine from behind. Clean, low-key professional work with zero HR complaints. 3 down, 1 more to go. Stepping out from my tree's cover, I watched the final wolf catch sight of yet another skeleton showing up and totally lose its mind. It bolted away in the opposite direction, though I didn't bother chasing it. Bending down instead, I grabbed a fist-sized rock, weighed it up, and calculated the fleeing target's speed, its trajectory, and the exact angle needed. Winding up with a full-body rotation, every ounce of my newly upgraded skeletal strength got channeled into a single throw, whoosh, sailing through the air in a pristine arc. The projectile nailed the wolf right in its back knee joint. Boom! The creature shrieked, its leg buckling as it tumbled violently across the turf. It tried to push back up, but that knee was completely fried, casually strolling over with its bone, sword raised. Number one finished up the rest of the job. For 4, an absolute W. Now this is where things got wild. Approaching one of the fallen wolf carcasses, I pressed my palm firmly against it. I've been wondering all along, could I forge skeletons out of animal remains? Energy surged straight out of my hand, making the wolf's body shrivel up like a deflating balloon. The flesh dissolved while the blood completely evaporated, leaving nothing behind except a pristine wolf skeleton. Then my ability kicked into gear once more, causing those wolf bones to twist and reshape. The skeletal pieces started reorganizing, grinding, clicking, and snapping right into new configurations. Suddenly, a standard humanoid skeleton rose up from the dirt, leaving the original wolf framework gone, fully consumed and converted. So that's how this mechanic operates. The initial shape doesn't matter at all, since any bones will suffice. My power simply recycles everything into standard issue infantry. Humanoid skeletons, period. I immediately processed the remaining 3 wolf bodies in that exact same fashion. 4 brand new skeleton minions stood surrounding me now, fresh off the assembly line. Employee numbers 2 and 3, along with 4 and 5, a random vibe hit me, where number 1's origins truly rooted in that villager's father's bones, or after my magic reworked them completely. Do those bones even count anymore? It's like wondering if ashes would still retain their past identity, given that the original matter got fully consumed and rebuilt into a fresh build. Honestly, that's a deep philosophical rabbit hole I'll skip. For now, since I got a 5-skeleton squad to manage. Number 1 stands as the veteran with a bone sword, while numbers 2 through 5 are total noobs, waiting on their mandatory training arc. Time to figure out how these rookies can secure their very first breakthroughs. The Undead Army assembly line is officially open for business. 4 shiny new skeletons stand neatly in a row. 2, 3, 4, and 5, fresh off the wolf bone manufacturing line. Bony, bright white, and brand new, paired with number 1, giving me a solid squad of 5. Time to copy-paste that success. Since the formula is pretty straightforward, guide them straight to their maiden independent kill, trigger the breakthrough, and watch them evolve. I've totally figured out the meta and cracked the code here, so this should be an absolute breeze. I picked up a decent-looking stick off the ground, ambled over to number 2, and shoved it straight into his hand. After pointing dramatically toward an empty clearing, I dropped what I genuinely thought was the most epic pep talk in undead history. Go forth, brave warrior, and start hunting, for this is the finest blade our village has to offer. Number 2 tilted his skull as his soul fire flickered, slowly loading, processing the input before springing into action. He spun around sharply, hoisted the stick high into the air, and brought it crashing down right onto number 3's cranium. 3's head popped completely off his shoulders, launching skyward in a flawless parabolic arc, bouncing twice on the dirt before rolling right up to my boots. 3's headless frame swayed awkwardly right there, acting like a thoroughly confused mannequin, with its bare arm bones swinging around aimlessly, while number 2 froze dead in his follow-through pose, looking quite perplexed as to why his target had lost its head with zero effort. Absolute silence fell over the shadowy forest, as I looked down and saw Three's skull staring straight back up, staring up at me from the dirt. Were 4 empty eye sockets locking onto mine yet again. Honestly, this is turning into a total vibe. Pinching Three's skull with 2 fingers like a gross gym sock, I let out a heavy sigh and trudged over to his headless body, before seamlessly snapping it back into place. Click. Well, trial run totally bombed. Big yikes. Time for a quick debrief to see where things went sideways. Hunting concepts are way too abstract for a fresh skeleton. Skeleton 2 genuinely had zero clue what a prey animal even was. Upon hearing the command to hit something, he just locked onto the closest target, which happened to be poor Three's head. Spoken directions are totally useless here. These guys literally share the brain cell count of a brick. Visual learning is an absolute must for a new strategy. Blasting one straightforward command through the soul link. I reached out to all 4 rookies. Watch. Number 1 saw 4 skulls tilt in unison, then swivel toward number 1 with uncanny coordination. Super low-key creepy, but hey, it worked. Next, I instructed number 1 to show them how a hunt is done. Number 1's soul fire flickered brightly, showing he caught the drift before marching straight into the timber. Marching in a single file line right behind him, the 4 rookies stiffly mimicked his every single stride. It genuinely looked like the most cursed kindergarten field trip in existence, featuring 1 giant skeleton teacher dragging 4 wobbly skeleton toddlers through morning calisthenics. After 30 minutes of scouring the area, number 1 finally located the target, consisting of 6 rabbits munching grass roots inside a thicket. Spinning around to face his 4 nervous students, number 1 clacked his jaw once, pay attention, and pounced. Diving into the brush with absolute surgical precision, he batted 1 rabbit airborne using the flat of his blade, leaving it thoroughly bruised yet breathing. Then he neatly sliced the back legs off 4 additional rabbits. Fast, pristine, and totally professional. The 6th rabbit was sliced clean down the middle, before he grabbed the dead carcass and strolled back to his class. He had essentially set up a mini training arena, featuring 5 crippled bunnies helplessly flopping around the turf, completely grounded and ready as practice dummies. Difficulty status, absolute tutorial mode. Dropping his dead prize straight onto the forest floor, number 1 pointed his sword at the struggling targets. Class dismissed, go get to work. Holding their sticks high, the 4 rookies rushed right into the chaos. And dude, watching that absolute clown show was straight up painful. Number 2 swung so violently he completely missed his target, while nearly face-planting over his own feet. Lunging at a rabbit, number 3 missed by a mile, and drove his weapon so deep into the dirt, it almost snapped in half, while numbers 4 and 5 chased the exact same bunny, collided head-on with each other, and sent bone shards flying in every direction. Amidst a loud clatter, yet this time around, the objective was straightforward enough, even for literal skeleton brains. Make the floppy thing stop moving already. Just whack it with a stick, period. At least that much they could process. With sticks thrashing wildly, the frantic pursuit went on. Skeletons rattling, rabbits flopping everywhere. Whack. Number 2 finally connected. Would met rabbit skull squarely. The creature twitched twice and went completely still. Soul Link explosion, a massive energy wave unleashed. Breakthrough confirmed, then number 3 secured his kill, followed quickly by 4 and then 5. One after another, my lovable idiots finally figured it out. All 4 marched right back toward me, hauling their dead prey like proud cats showing off trophies, and dropped them at my feet, reporting for duty, sir. Mission successfully accomplished, sir. 4 energy waves slammed into me all at once. My internal soul fire flared from a cozy campfire into a raging bonfire. Time for all of you to evolve. The command rippled across all 4 soul links simultaneously. Their skeletal frames began expanding and creaking loudly, stretching outward as the dull yellow tint bleached away into a sleek, polished white. They grew taller, bulkier, and way more menacing. When the transformation finally ceased, all 4 stood shoulder to shoulder with number 1/2. Towering a whole head above me, though unlike number 1, they sported full sets of arms, featuring on their left sides compact round shields crafted entirely from solid bone. Standard issue gear designed for brand new Tier 1 skeleton soldiers. The sheer energy feedback from 4 simultaneous evolutions hit my system like an absolute freight train. shifting my soul fire from a glowing bonfire into something resembling a compact industrial furnace. My bones grew distinctly heavier and much denser, producing a deep, solid echo with every step I took. Before diving into today's action, let's run a quick power check, guys. My strength used to max out at a pathetic 1 chihuahua. Ever since number 1's insane evolution went down, that power spike from 2 chihuahuas straight up to 5. Honestly, I could low-key solo an entire dog park right now. Throwing a glance back at my squad, I saw 5 tier, 1 skeleton soldiers locked tight in formation. We're talking about a legit unit, a real army in the making. The skeleton mass production pipeline is officially operational, folks. It's giving aesthetic, and now we're about to snowball this hard. Meanwhile, in a totally different plot twist, I was apparently causing a whole-ass scene back at the village. That flashy flower guy, Devant is his actual name, just burst doors open at the local tavern, looking like he got dragged through a literal pig pen. His clothes were on backwards and utterly shredded, while his face was completely caked in sweat and thick mud. He slammed some random copper coins down on the sticky bar top, chugged half a beer in one breathless gulp, and dropped a total bombshell on everyone. He swore a skeleton mage was lurking out in the dead bone forest. He even whipped out the exact arm bone I dropped when number 1 blew up mid-sprint as irrefutable evidence. He was waving my poor employee's spare parts around like crazy, treating it like a courtroom exhibit, but the old village chief, that guy was way too sharp, picked up a stray arm bone, sniffed it casually like some fancy wine sommelier, and dropped the single most terrifyingly accurate read anyone has ever put out about me. He announced that wasn't any regular skeleton mage, since a real mage is only born at tier 3, which would mean everyone present would be dead in seconds. Faced with the question of what else it could be, the old man's eyes went dark. He whispered an undead lord, causing the whole tavern to instantly lose its mind. Patrons started shouting that it was just an old myth, arguing that even their grandpa's grandpa had never witnessed one. Yet the chief quickly shut every single critic up and proceeded to lay out my entire playbook step by step, as if he'd been secretly reading my personal diary. Undead lords possess actual human intelligence, he explained. They start out weak, but can convert the dead and evolve infinitely. They operate as a full army, meaning grave digging was just for resources. The threatening behavior was pure self-defense, and running away happened simply because the build was still too weak. Excuse me, sir, but I feel heavily exposed and called out right now. Every single point he made was dead-on accurate. That old man is honestly way too dangerous. And then, out of nowhere, he hit them with the absolute final kill shot. Our settlement sits right next to that shadowy forest. Once those monsters max out their squads, who do you think gets paid a visit first? Fast forward 10 minutes like we're speedrunning a grocery trip. Every single villager was packing bags to ghost town it over to some place dubbed the Iron Fortress. Not gonna lie, props to you, old-timer. That a big brain play, and I totally respect the grind. Even so, you're totally late to the party because back in my domain, things were absolute vibes. I lined up my squad of 5 tier 1 skeleton bros to run their very first legit military inspection. Pay attention and call out numbers starting from the left. Clack. Number 1 barked his status, snapping his head right with a sharp clack clack. Clack clack. Looking pristine. Wait, hold up, clack. My brain short-circuited since I only deployed 5 soldiers. Yet 6 distinct clacks echoed through the air, making me whip around, and almost stab my own finger bone, straight into the empty eye socket of some random skeleton, loitering at the edge of the formation. Where the actual heck did you drop in from? This random NPC was definitely not part of my official roster. Looking all crusty, malnourished, and low-key tragic. Devoid of any soul link, this was straight up a wild skeleton. Just some random feral bone boy who wandered over from the woods because he caught the vibe of a squad hanging out and decided to crash the event uninvited. He tilted his skull sideways at my interrogation and clacked his jaw back at me. Clack. Oh, so you're throwing sass now, little guy? I pointed an accusatory finger right at the intruder with dramatic flair. Unauthorized personnel are strictly banned from my military grid. Strict discipline is the meta here, so take him apart. My 5 loyal soldiers immediately dogpiled this poor dude, like he owed them rent money. A flurry of crude bone swords and shields came raining down, before he could even process his life choices. In 2 seconds flat, he was completely reduced to a scattered pile of debris. Soulfire snuffed out, Employee contract terminated in the most literal way possible. I strolled over to the pile of remains and gave it a stare. Wait a second, though. Can I get a quick recycle on this junk? I extended my hand to cast my signature undead revival spell directly onto the dusty heap of bones as they started twitching, clicking back together into place and reassembling rapidly before hoisting themselves up, though this time it was definitely not that same trashy wild skeleton. Every single bone gleamed with a smooth, polished finish, while the soul fire burned intensely bright, and above all else, a brand new soul link suddenly popped up inside my head. He officially belonged to me now, and check out his status. A Tier 1 skeleton soldier. Are you dead-ass kidding me? Getting a free Tier 1 soldier with 0 training required meant I completely skipped the entire boring tutorial. No caching pesquirabits, no tedious stick swinging lessons, and no accidental decapitations of any poor coworkers. All I had to do was pick up wild skeletons, recycle them, and boom, instant leveled up soldier ready to roll. I slowly gazed all around this gloomy forest, this dark, lifeless, yet weirdly gorgeous forest brimming with wild skeletons, just aimlessly wandering around like they were waiting to get drafted. My internal soul fire was glowing so ridiculously bright. You could probably spot the glow clear from outer space. With a theatrical sweep, I flung my arm dramatically outward. All units move out. We are actively recruiting right now. The Grand Skeleton Army. Expansion plan just snowballed straight into a massive avalanche. A full day drifted by, while I uncovered a wonderful little perk about forest life. Not a single soul cares about us. We are basically low-key invisible. Sure, a couple of dumb beast packs tried treating my boys like chew toys, only to get totally dismantled and converted into fresh recruits. Talk about natural selection working heavily in my favor. Aside from that, everything else showed total indifference. A plump deer literally trotted right up to number 3, sniffed his bone, pulled a disgusted face, and ambled away. We literally got taste tested and completely rejected. That proves just how totally irrelevant we are to the food chain. We are neither prey, nor are we any kind of predators. We're basically just a bunch of walking furniture. That made me realize why on earth I was wasting time hunting rabbits. The local squirrel union was probably filing legal restraining orders against me by this point, because I had cooked up a way better business model. I like to call it armed parade fishing. You see, my squad of skeleton soldiers acts like a giant glowing "come join us" signal beacon, directed at every single clueless wild skeleton in this forest. We just stroll around while they crawl straight out of the dirt, emerging from tree hollows and rotting leaf piles, pulling toward us like absolute moths to a bone-colored flame. They waddle right up behind our marching formation, looking all innocent and curious right before I wave my hand. My boys charge in while swords and shields clash with a loud bang, smash and wallop. And just like that, a wild skeleton turns into spare parts. Strolling right up, I zapped it with my recycling perk, and boom, leveling up instantly. 0 practice needed for this fresh, brand new Tier 1 soldier. Just 48 hours of this hustle, and I was flexing a squad of 100 skeletons. It was high time to instill some legit military discipline. Scrambling up onto a massive boulder, I got into position. Puffing out my non-existent ribcage, I struck a pose. Outroared my very first official command to the 100 troops below. Attention everyone. Lock it down and form a square. A square. You guys actually know what a square looks like, right? Half veered left while others just spun around in dizzy circles. A couple of weirdos suddenly started hugging each other tight, starting to inspect each other's skeletal frames. They looked like nerdy researchers running a deep analysis on bone anatomy for a science project. Cut it out. Seriously, stop. My soul fire was low-key throwing a fit. Okay, let's switch to combat drills. Go attack those trees around you. Start swinging your weapon straight at the trunk people. Whack, crack, clang echoed through the air. Not a single strike actually connected with the tree. Every single swing nailed an innocent co-worker instead. Dozens of my guys got completely shattered into pieces by their own overly hyped teammates. They lined up waiting for me to piece them back together, like a bunch of broken toys at a repair station. This is an elite army. This is straight up a psychiatric ward. Out of 100 employees, only the original 6 rank as Tier 1. The remaining 94 possess the fighting capability of aggressively rabid chihuahuas, meaning they all need to evolve. Hunting down wild rabbits for 94 separate initial kills, though, would literally drive the local rodent population to extinction, causing the Forest Wildlife Protection Agency to put a massive bounty on my skull, which, let's be real, is literally my entire body. Time for plan B. Let's try internal training. Dragging number 1 and number 6 right up front, I gave instructions. You two give us a demo on how to spar nicely, and don't actually wreck each other, alright? Number 1 pulled out his blade, while number 6 raised his shield. They immediately started trading blows back and forth. Clink, clink, clang rang out cleanly, with proper techniques and perfectly controlled movements. It was a gorgeous display of Tier 1 combat form. 94 pairs of empty eye sockets lit up brightly with blazing soul fires. They definitely got the message. Or at least they thought they did, because what unfolded next was pure, unadulterated chaos. Number 78 and number 79, standing right next to each other like besties, simultaneously lifted their sticks and smashed each other in the face. An instant chain reaction sparked off right away. Suddenly, the entire clearing blew up into a massive, low-key, chaotic skeleton battle royale. Without wasting a beat, every single skeleton grabbed the closest partner and started beating the absolute living death out of each other with bones flying everywhere. Skulls were rolling across the dirt and rib cages were shattering into pieces. Stop, everybody, just stop. Like an absolute maniac, I was jumping up and down frantically on top of my rock. Over 80 skeletons were locked in an all-out brawl. One poor skeleton got its head violently knocked clean off, and that same head rolled straight to another skeleton's feet, who immediately picked it up and bolted across the ground, taking out 2 more guys like bowling pins. This is an absolute disaster. This is ding number 82. Club number 95 struck so hard that his entire rib cage just exploded. His skull rolled away as his soul fire completely went out. Breakthrough conditions were officially met. A wave of energy feedback slammed into me through the soul link. My own soul fire began pulsing with a warm glow. I froze in place, and every single skeleton froze right along with me. The whole world suddenly went on pause. After 3 tense seconds of absolute silence, my soul fire erupted. Of course, it all makes total sense now. They don't even need to hunt animals out here. They can just fight each other instead. The losers simply become raw materials. The winners score their very first kill, triggering a breakthrough. And I get a nice energy feedback boost from every single one of them who evolves. This isn't a psychiatric ward anymore. This is a full-blown coliseum. In 0 seconds flat, I switched personas from a panicking hospital director straight into a hype fight commentator. Keep going, guys. Do not stop. Yes, number 8 just took out his left leg. And 37's combat stance is looking way too weak. You absolute idiot. You don't even have a weapon. Rip out one of your own ribs and slap him across the face with it. The winners of these fights get to evolve, while the losers just become spare parts. The entire battlefield had gone completely feral, with bones crunching and skulls flying everywhere. Ghostly soul fires were flickering out left and right in the chaos. The survivors who managed to lock down their first kills were undergoing evolution, one after another, with over 40 of them leveling up. Brand new Tier 1 skeleton soldiers rose up straight from the wreckage of their fallen peers, glowing with fresh, polished bones, as they stood tall, amidst the bone-strewn wreckage of their fallen rivals, and claiming the true glory, my OG starting squad. Saw number 1's blade stretch out significantly, fringed with vicious, razor-sharp bone spikes. Level 2 skeleton swordsman. Number 2 manifested a hefty longbow crafted from spine and leg remnants, accompanied by a quiver of pale bone arrows strapped to his back. Level 2 skeleton archer, while numbers 3 through 5 gained bulkier, heavier frames outfitted with beefed-up skeletal shields. As level 2 skeleton infantry and number 6, the absolute flex of the whole evolution batch, witnessed an entire warhorse materialize beneath him, constructed entirely out of solid bone, so he could vault smoothly into the saddle, looking like a low-key medieval cavalry unit. Level 2 skeleton cavalry. I checked out my squad. My wonderfully chaotic, downright terrifying army forged through the absolute most unhinged team-building exercise in corporate management history. Gladiator matches for skeletons. That is my go-to training program. I am the worst boss ever, and simultaneously the greatest general alive. The very first agenda item right after the gladiator tournament was bringing all the losers back to life. I strolled through the battlefield, pressing my palm down onto every shattered heap of bones. Click, 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 and snapping them right back into place. One skeleton bounced up, inspected his flawlessly restored ribcage, glared daggers at the guy who had just demolished him, and raised his club for round 2. Hold up, stop right there. I slapped a soul command onto him so fast. His weapon froze midair. He gave me this utterly confused look, as if saying, "But boss, he started first." Yet here is the absolute best part. They retain every single memory of every clash, every single blow taken, and every combat move learned. It is all safely stored in there. Death is basically nothing more than a minor glitch, a brief timeout, or a quick catnap. Half a day later, all 100 skeletons had fully evolved into Tier 1, standing in crisp, orderly ranks across the forest clearing. A legitimate fighting force. I am far from that pathetic skeleton who used to get chased down by a flower-wielding villager now. I'm essentially a village chieftain at this point. A certified warlord, a company tier commander. We've officially hit the big leagues, boys. A full 100 soldiers, which is basically an entire company back on Earth. It was time to get organized, so I pulled out my 6 elite Tier 2 units. Everyone in 6 troops took 50 soldiers. Keep pushing deeper into the woods, folks. Recruit more from Tiers 2 through 5. Take the other 50 and roll with me. We're setting up a base, and while skeletons don't need houses, I sure needed a headquarters. A real symbol, the actual birthplace of my undead civilization, FR. That dream lasted for about 15 minutes, though, because commanding skeletons into combat is one thing, but getting them to handle construction? That's a whole different level of nightmare. Low-key. Dig a foundation 3 skeletons long. 10 skeletons wide. Let's move. 10 skeletons grab their own bones, wielding swords and shields like makeshift shovels. They were digging away with insane efficiency, making me think this was actually going to work. Then one skeleton got so locked in on digging that he dove headfirst straight into the hole, basically burying himself alive. All I could see were 2 feet kicking wildly in the air. The skeleton, standing right next to him, watched his buddy vanish into the dirt. Did he pull him out? Absolutely not. He just started shoveling the dirt right back in, even patting the earth down using his shield to pack it nice and tight. You absolute idiot. I told you to dig, not bury yourself. And you were supposed to rescue the guy, not give him an impromptu funeral. He rushed over and yanked the buried skeleton right out by his ankles. He shook the dirt off his skull like a soaked dog and immediately went straight back to digging, acting like literally nothing had happened. Meanwhile, over with the logging team, 20 skeletons were hacking at trees, and it was even worse since they had zero concept of cutting from a base. They were just mindlessly whacking away at the middle of the trunks. One absolute genius decided ground-level chopping was way too boring, so he scaled a tree, sat comfortably on a branch, and started sawing through the exact branch he was sitting on. "What are you even doing? Get down and crack." The branch snapped clean. The skeleton, along with half a tree, crashed hard to the ground, resulting in instant disassembly. His co-workers gathered around the pile of bones, watched him piece himself back together, shrugged off the incident, and went right back to random chopping. My soul fire was legit boiling over with pure rage. Yet the construction crew, who held the absolute heavyweight championship of utter stupidity, had 20 skeletons hauling heavy timber for the frame. Other skeletons were still trying to climb out of the deep foundation pit when the hauling squad rolled up with massive logs and dropped them right down inside. Crunching bone sounds immediately echoed from below. "Stop, there are people down." There I sprinted over the guys haven't climbed out yet. "And you're throwing logs on them. Are you trying to commit murder?" Tilting his head, the skeleton who dropped the log stared back, pointing first at the pit and then at the timber pile. His blue soul fire blinking all innocent-like. His whole vibe was literally, "Isn't this what you asked me to do?" I was running back and forth across the messy building site, like a majorly stressed-out foreman, whose entire crew shared just one single brain cell, and that brain cell was totally on vacation. I finally got why every novel always claims undead apocalypses leave behind nothing but ruins. It's not because the undead actually destroy everything. It's because they can't construct a single thing without demolishing the place in the process. Suddenly my survival instinct screamed out, and I whipped around. A massive chopped-up tree trunk, was groaning loudly and tumbling straight toward me. Oh snap. I bolted instantly, thanks to 100 Tier 1 and 6 Tier 2 evolution feedbacks. I'm Tier 1 myself now, so I'm wicked fast. Boom. The heavy timber slammed down right where I'd been standing. The ground shook as I spun back around, my soul fire blazing fiercely with pure anger. Who did that number 2? Skillfully. Raised a bony finger to point at a fellow skeleton, who was currently just a pile of scattered bones, next to the fallen trunk since the tree had crushed him too. Talk about total karma stomping right over there. I resurrected the idiot and without saying a single word, hoisted him up to toss him right back into the pit. Then I grabbed a shovel, full of dark dirt, and buried him deep up to his neck, leaving just his skull poking out. You're staying put right there until tomorrow. Right before your eyes, his soul fire fluttered twice in panic. A pathetic little click echoed from his jaw, which was honestly just sad. Completely pathetic, though I almost felt bad for him for a split second. Summoning every single tree-chopping skeleton over to my spot, I pointed straight at a completely untouched tree. Watch and learn, because here comes step 1. Carve a notch into the side you want to drop. Step 2 is slicing a clean wedge right above it. Step 3 involves cutting straight through from the opposite direction. And the moment it begins to lean, you better sprint away fast, which I demonstrated flawlessly. Then, I glared right at the buried skeleton's sad little skull sticking out of the dirt. Anyone else who drops a tree on me from now on is turning into a permanent foundation pillar. Are we crystal clear on that? 99 soul fires flickered nervously. Yeah, we're clear. Meanwhile, somewhere out in a region I had zero clues about, the humble villagers of Deadbone Village, aka my old neighbors, the folks whose graveyard I might have slightly messed up, were dragging themselves across the desolate wasteland in one long, miserable line bound for Iron Fortress. Running for their lives from me, apparently. Leading the pack right from the front was the elderly village chief, who kept promising they would hit Iron Fortress in 48 hours. That old guy was low-key a genius, having already figured out my exact end goal, which boiled down to some second-hand clout and respect. Suddenly, a cloud of dust kicked up on the horizon, signaling approaching cavalry riders. And wouldn't you know it, Hams was one of them. Just a kid from Deadbone who shipped out years ago to grind out a living as an Iron Fortress militiaman. The exhausted villagers completely lost their minds, their weary faces lighting up like jack-o'-lanterns. Even my old buddy, the flower enthusiast who was somehow still breathing at this point, was waving his arms wildly and hollering hellos. It felt like true salvation had arrived, seeing their own hometown boy rolling in with actual knights. Yet the veteran chief immediately spotted what everyone else missed. Those were definitely not Iron Fortress knights. That specific armor and those banners belonged entirely to the Lost Iron Holy Theocracy, a totally foreign religious faction who had zero business poking around this deep inside Imperial territory, especially while riding side by side with Hams, making the old chief's blood run instantly ice cold. Desperately trying to hold the villagers back, he shouted for them to halt. Yet the crowd was already barreling straight toward the cavalry, moving with the frantic energy of drowning folks, low-key chasing any hope in sight. Left with zero choices, the old man took immediate action, sliding backward through the frantic mob like a phantom in the dust. He ducked straight into the roadside brush and sprinted back toward the village at full speed. Warning the rest of the villagers who stayed behind was an absolute must. Blocking the path ahead, a paladin known as Sir Kyle watched the helpless crowd rushing right at him, while wearing a chillingly gentle smile. His polished armor gleamed brightly, resembling a holy saint walking among everyday mortals. Leaning in close, he murmured something quietly to Hams, gripping his reins so tightly that Hams's knuckles turned completely white. His anxious horse stomped its hooves against the dirt. Every single rider besides Hams instantly grabbed their longbows in terrifying sync. Arrows were nocked and bowstrings pulled taut. Wait, what are you guys doing? Devant watched as that eerie smile never faded from Kyle's face. For one frozen, surreal heartbeat, he caught sight of a gleaming golden shaft floating in the warm sunlight over his old man's wheat field. His father, whose grave I literally dug up just days ago, feeling bizarrely peaceful, warm, and millions of miles away. Suddenly, A deadly rain of metal arrows plummeted from the sky. Those agonizing screams lasted mere seconds, before dead silence took over as Devant stared down at the arrow, poking straight through his chest. His eyes drifted up toward Hams, his longtime neighbor and childhood buddy, who sat frozen on his mount like a lifeless stone statue. Why did a second arrow have to wipe out everything else? Sir Kyle surveyed his horrific handiwork with totally unchanged pity, acting as if the bodies bleeding out into the mud were just falling autumn leaves instead of human beings. He gently tapped Hams right on the shoulder. Don't sweat it, pal, because this is for the good of the Empire. For your own future, trust me, their deaths actually mean something. Hopping off their horses, the cavalry finally began their real mission, slipping the clothes right off the corpses and throwing fresh uniforms onto them, stamped with the unmistakable insignia of the theocracy, tossing rusted blades casually beside the fallen bodies. It was messy execution, totally intentionally sloppy work, since this whole thing was a classic false flag operation. Staging it to look like the holy theocracy had just ambushed imperial citizens. It was a total low-key lie, yet devastatingly effective, forcing Hems to comply while dodging the gaze of anyone he had grown up alongside and shared drinks with, until she suddenly appeared. A little girl who used to chase him everywhere, just begging for candy, making him violently throw up by his horse. Stepping up behind him, Sir Kyle whispered smoothly like silk, "First time's always rough. You'll totally get used to it soon enough. After going through this, you're a certified knight." Wiping his mouth, Hems nodded and asked, "Sir, is the mission complete so we can head back now?" With a soft chuckle, Kyle shook his head like a teacher correcting a kid. "Back? No, not yet. We still need to hit up Deadbone Village, torching every single house and slaughtering anything that breathes. A massacre has got to be thorough to genuinely spark outrage, crafting a narrative so terrifying that every single citizen inside Iron Fortress and across the entire Empire will be crying out for total war against the theocracy." Clenching his fist tight before slowly letting it relax, Hamza knew deep down from the moment he agreed to Sir Kyle. There was no turning back, replying, "Yes, sir," as he steered his horse toward Deadbone Village. The setting sun cast their distorted shadows behind them, stretching long and ugly across the blood-soaked ground. Knee-deep in construction chaos is when I caught it. Literally the most aesthetic sound ever. Synchronized clacking, marching in perfect rhythm straight out of the deep forest, emerging from the tree-line like returning war heroes. Number 1 and Number 6 appeared, followed not by the 50 soldiers I originally dispatched, but 30 brand new recruits already evolved to Tier 1, wielding bone swords and shields already, marching in tight formation like elite troops, while my construction crew, right behind me, was accidentally burying each other alive, making the contrast hilarious, though here's the real plot twist. Hitting Tier 1 apparently unlocked a brand new ability for me, without me even noticing, allowing me to delegate my undead revival power to a single trusted subordinate, with just one slot available for now, which I gave to Number 1, my absolute firstborn and employee of the century. Meaning Number 1 was out there running things in the forest. He's totally recycling wild skeletons completely on his own, and every single one of them still links directly back to me. My vassals are still my vassals. Do you guys even grasp what this means? Running 2 separate operations simultaneously is totally doable for me now. We're talking base construction and army expansion at the same time, while I'm stuck here teaching these absolute clowns not to bury themselves alive. Number 1 is out there literally snowballing the whole army. The future is looking low-key glowing, guys. My mood just did a massive 180 out of nowhere. Even my total disaster of a construction crew suddenly looked kind of lovable. Standing tall, I cleared my totally non-existent throat in the dusty air, and finally started dropping actually useful instructions. Listen up, Foundation team. Clear out every single root and pesky rock in sight. I need this ground flat like dead-ass flat. Stack some heavy stones at these 4 corners right now. Slap some thick mud into the gaps and pack it down tight. With a sweep of my bony hand, I pointed straight at a massive stone slab that numbers 2 through 5 had just dragged over. Use this chunk of rock as a hammer and pound the dirt until it's completely solid. Anybody who tries to slack off on my watch gets buried straight into the ground as a foundation pillar. armed with clear tools and methods that actually made sense. Things finally started rolling smoothly. A whole dozen skeletons hoisted the heavy slab up together and brought it crashing down hard. Boom, 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 shaking the earth. That right there actually looked like real construction progress. Spinning around, I faced the building crew next. These 4 thick logs are going to be our main pillars. Sharpen the bottoms right away and jam them securely into the stone gaps. Keep them straight. They absolutely have to be straight. The skeletons immediately started chopping away with their crude bone swords, until one absolute genius casually sat down right on the log and started hacking furiously at the exact spot between his own legs, which honestly made me lose it. Their skulls are definitely stuffed with cheap cotton instead of soul fire, I swear. After wrestling 4 wildly wobbly pillars into their proper positions, I moved right along to the crossbeams. Carve a neat little notch at the very top of every single pillar, just a small groove. Then lay the crossbeam right across it and lash it down securely with vines. Tight, I mean super tight, got it? One skeleton clearly heard the words carve a notch and went totally berserk on a main support pillar. He chopped straight through the top part completely, leaving a clean cut, and then proudly waved his bone sword right at my face, acting like he just won a medal, while I secretly wanted to take him apart piece by piece, instead using his bones as literal firewood to keep warm. A deep breath of crisp air was drawn into my lungs, even though breathing wasn't even biologically happening. Mortise and tendon joinery was personally demonstrated right there, alongside a random skeleton, which is my surreal life now. Up went the skeletal frame, looking totally wobbly and sus. The walls stood somehow, though their stability was super questionable. Next up, the heavy logs needed to be stacked horizontally, interlocking in a neat alternating pattern from end to end. Then one smart Alex skeleton realized his log was way too short. Tilting his skull, he pondered the minor design flaw, before casually detaching his own metal shield and wedging it right under the timber as a makeshift shim. Boom, level at last, as he proudly patted his bony hands together, totally flexing over his own improvised engineering solution. Another clueless skeleton spotted that his section sat way too high, so he boldly yanked a log right out of his neighbor's finished wall. Crash went 1/2 meter of carefully stacked masonry into oblivion, collapsing into a tragic pile of rubble while I buried my face, though technically possessing no face or hands to cover it with. The dramatic gesture of pure despair was totally necessary. Somehow, the roofing crew managed to be an even bigger vibe kill. The master plan was dead simple: a layer of bark, followed by thatch, then sealed tightly with thick mud. Up scrambled one eager skeleton to lay down the bark strips, while a second skeleton refused to wait for him to finish, climbing right behind with a ridiculously massive bundle of thatch, and dropping the entire heavy load straight onto his co-worker's skull. Furious, the bark layer skeleton lost his temper instantly, snatching up a piece of timber to throw right back at him. 2 grown skeletons perched 5 meters high on wooden crossbeams started throwing a full-blown toddler-style material temper tantrum, with one tossing grass and the other chucking bark back and forth like total babies. "Get down here right now," was yelled at the top of my lungs. Mid-shout, the clumsy bark thrower slipped and took a bad tumble. Splat went a chaotic pile of loose bones hitting the hard dirt. Once he finally clicked all his pieces back into place, my bony finger pointed straight at the pit foundation below, where a sad, lonely skull was still poking awkwardly out of the dirt. "See him? Want to join him down there?" I asked sarcastically. That scared skeleton shook his skull back and forth so fast, his jawbone nearly detached before he got right back to work. Number 1 and 6 were immediately dispatched with 80 grunts for expansion, with strict orders to check in and report back every other night. Clack went their jaws in crisp acknowledgement, as the undead army marched deeply into the dark forest. Numbers 2 through 5 were then pulled aside by me. "You 4, stop carrying logs right this second. 4 pairs of hollow eye sockets are locked onto me right now, guys, having closely watched my labor all day long without a break. You are way sharper than these clueless meatheads. From this exact moment, Safety Officers is your new title. Foundation and construction will be supervised by numbers 2 and 3. Logging and transport are now under the watch of numbers 4 and 5. My finger swung straight toward the rest of my clown show workforce. Your daily grind is to copy what I've been doing this whole time. Anyone who dares to break protocol, or anyone who tries to get sneaky and creative, gets buried right beside our buddy over there, as part of a creepy bone pillar, as the four of them swapped sideways glances. Their inner soul fires flickered dimly, with what totally looked like pure reluctance. Managing this gig was low-key way harder than just lugging random junk. Yet orders are strict orders, no cap. Breaking up quickly, they marched off toward their assigned zones. Middle management was officially locked in. I completely face-planted onto a cold rock and went totally limp. Every single bone in my skeleton spread out flat on the ground. My inner soul felt completely drained and hollowed out. I made up my mind to catch some heavy ZS. Well, undead creatures don't actually need physical sleep at all. But after finding out, I possess literally infinite lifespan. I picked up this quirky habit of just completely turning my brain off and spacing out into the void while daydreaming hard. It remains one of the only viable pastimes. When you're an animation skeleton who cannot eat, cannot drink, and can't even scroll his phone anymore. Today was totally exhausting, even though I don't even possess muscles to feel tired with. Stumbling awake from my deep nap, the very first sight greeting me was a shelter, an improvised house sitting right there in the valley, looking like a tipsy uncle at a family party, totally crooked, questionable in structure, yet somehow, miraculously, still standing upright. The rough logs were piled up like a toddler playing a reckless game of Jenga, and the muddy mortar looked like someone violently sneezed it into the cracks. That clumsy thatched roof possessed the chaotic aesthetic of a shredded dog toy, with its pointed peak leaning so drastically. It looked like it was plotting to run away. I paced around the perimeter twice, before dropping a heavy kick against the wall, solid. Surprisingly solid. These absolute buffoons accidentally engineered something sturdy. Wait a minute, someone actually went ahead and shoved tiny wild blossoms right into the wall gaps. Bright pink and red flowers sitting on a grim, undead construction site. It's giving birthday balloons slapped onto a graveyard. What absolute brainlet pulled that stunt, I grumbled, even though my inner soul fire was low-key warm. Touch low-key, but keep that between us. Numbers 2 through 5 marched up for their morning stand-up. Tier 2 skeletons standing totally at attention, looking insanely professional, compared to those drooling noobs trailing behind, who were still smearing mud over everything. A soul notification pinged in. Report to the Sovereign. 0 safety incidents yesterday. Let's go, the safety officer protocol is actually working. Easily the biggest management W of my entire undead career. Promoting those 4 was straight up genius. I gestured at that hideous, yet cute cabin and dropped the verdict. This is the blueprint. Build me 100 of these right now. The undead empire is officially launched today. Then I stake my claim on the very first house as my crib. I'm a sovereign, so I get first dibs, obviously. First item on the royal agenda. I needed a bed, picking out the thickest log in sight, and having some soldiers carve a body-shaped groove into it, with exact measurements. I hopped in and laid down, cold timber pressing against cold bone. Absolute perfection. This is peak undead romance. This is a coffin, and it's 100% mine. For the throne room, I stood a massive tree stump vertically and chiseled the top into a proper seat. Throne secured, I placed smaller stumps all around it. For my future ministers, no ministers exist yet, but a true king always thinks ahead. My palace was basically just a cave filled with furniture, crafted by someone who had literally never seen furniture. Yet I loved it way more than any mega mansion. I was just about to sit on my throne and vibe out over the empire's future when I heard it. Earth-shattering bone footsteps echoing from deep in the woods. Every single skeleton across the work site instantly froze. Number 1 and number 6 burst straight out of the tree line. At the front of a roaring white bone tsunami. We're talking 150 soldiers now instead of 80. 70 fresh recruits, all tier 1. All completely strapped and marching in flawless formation. My total army count just hit the 200 mark. And right at that exact microsecond, as 70 new soul links flooded straight into my consciousness, something wild woke up deep inside me. A brand new power was low-key surging from the depths of my soul, realizing I could spend my own soul energy to grant true names to my absolute elite subordinates, shattering past their limits and shoving them straight into a higher evolution. With 6 slots available, I definitely knew who deserved them. Everybody was assembled by me. 200 skeletons packed tightly into the clearing. waiting in dead silence as I climbed onto my throne, clearing my non-existent throat dramatically, and channeling my main character, Sovereign Energy. Today officially marks the founding of our undead empire, and today the worthy finally get rewarded. I marched over to my original 6. My day 1's an absolute ride or die since day 1. From this day forward, you guys are nameless no more. Pointing straight at number 1, I declared you are my blade. Relentless in battle and embodying pure, unadulterated pride, I name you Skull Pride. Raw soul energy erupted straight from my finger and slammed violently into one's soul fire. His entire body exploded with chaotic change, bone spikes bursting wildly from his sword and extending it by half a meter into a monstrous, jagged great sword, while his skeleton grew taller and sharper, with vicious bone thorns sprouting out of every single joint. A suffocating wave of bloodthirsty killing intent blasted outward. Tier 3 Skeleton Berserker unlocked. Suddenly I felt super dizzy. That naming session drained way more battery than expected. Yet the fire burning in my eyes blazed even hotter. Number 2, you are my ultimate eagle eye, spotting everything and missing absolutely nothing. You shall represent envy, so I name you Skull Envy. 2's longbow stretched visibly longer and sleeker, while 3 glowing arrows in his quiver lit up with an eerie blue poison light. Tier 3 Venomous Archer activated. Number 3, you are my impenetrable shield, devouring all incoming attacks as the embodiment of gluttony. I name you Skull Gluttony. 3's chest cavity and ribs expanded massively outward, his bone shield ballooning instantly into a giant wall, built from overlapping heavy bone plates. Having doubled in size, he transformed into a literal walking fortress. Tier 3 Giant Shield. Skeleton number 4, you are exceptionally cunning and creative, wielding deadly magic from now on your lust. Skull Lust, that's your name now. I whispered, praying this crazy gamble would actually pay off. Raw energy surged inward, and all that scattered. Soul fire suddenly collapsed into a single, glowing point of deep purple. Out of nowhere, right into his grasp, a twisted staff crafted from black, thorny wood materialized like magic. Boom! A Tier 3 Skeleton Mage. We finally got ourselves a legit caster, even though I was totally running on fumes. And barely hanging on. Numero 5. You're my calculator and my master organizer, running the logistics of this whole growing empire. You embody pure greed, so I dub you Skull Greed. Number 5's evolution was easily the most low-key, terrifying thing to watch. Dark red. Muscle and sinew started sprouting rapidly all over his bleached bones, with thick flesh spreading across his entire skeletal frame. He literally went from being a basic skeleton straight into something packing actual meat and muscle. A Tier 3 ghoul equipped with a living body, and the absolute authority to boss around lower-rank units. For the very last one, I turned my gaze toward my loyal cavalry unit, sitting tall and imposing on his skeletal steed. You are my iron hoofs and the sharp tip of every single charge we make. You are Wrath, and I name you Skull Wrath. A wave of violent red energy violently detonated around number 6, making his horse let out a silent, ghostly roar up at the sky. That wild surge of energy permanently fused rider and mount into a single terrifying entity, turning the horse's bones thick, jet black, and menacing, while a full set of heavy, dark bone plate armor materialized right across number 6's new body. Even his simple sword morphed seamlessly into a massive, deadly cavalry lance. Behold, a Tier 3 Skeleton Knight. Stumbling backward from sheer exhaustion, I had to grab my throne just to stay upright. My soul honestly felt like it had been scooped clean out with a spoon. Holding that massive naming ceremony had pretty much drained me dry. Yet as I stared out at my 6 elite generals, my very own 7 deadly sins -1, with every single one standing as a Tier 3 powerhouse, I couldn't help thinking, totally worth it. Pride. The Berserker, Envy. The Poison Archer, Gluttony. The Fortress, Lust the Mage. Greed the Ghoul. Commander, and Wrath the Black Knight. My once pathetic skeleton kindergarten had finally graduated into a legit army led by named officers. No cap, the undead empire isn't a joke anymore. As I stood right at the edge of my dusty construction site, proudly surveying my entire empire, 200 Tier 1 foot soldiers, 6 brand new Tier 3 generals, and yours truly, Having just leveled up to a tier 2 sovereign, I flex my skeletal fingers, feeling an absolute surge of energy that totally dwarfed my previous strength. If that pissed-off Flower Village guy rolled up on me now, the power gap between us would literally be light years wide. While I still have zero clue how overpowered things get in this realm. Hey, worst case scenario, I can always just dip out and run. That low-key stealth phase is officially over. So it's high time to show this forest who's boss. Turning around to face my 200 soldiers, I let out the most extra dramatic war cry ever. Through the soul link, the entire squad rolled out in unison, ready to claim our crown as the undisputed rulers of these woods. Clack, clack, clack. Clack, clack. 200 skeletons marched in perfect sync, looking like a terrifying white bone tsunami that absolutely crushed the forest trail behind me. Gone were the days of playing stealthy scout patrol, because this was full-on, main character energy conquest. Pride took the lead as our ultimate vanguard, where just a tier 3 berserker's overwhelming aura alone made every critter within 100 meters freeze in absolute panic. His massive greatsword was bristling with barbed bone hooks, meaning every single swing literally ripped right through the atmosphere. Out of nowhere, a massive wild boar barreled from the bushes, desperately trying to defend its turf. Idiotic, but hey, gotta respect the hustle. Without even bothering to turn around, Pride hit it with a casual, devastating backhand swing, splash. The beast was sliced cleanly down the middle, hundreds of pounds of pork parting like warm butter. Guts spilled everywhere, yet Pride didn't even spare a glance, just strolling forward like he was casually swatting a housefly. I made one absolute ground rule for this campaign: zero killing of baby animals, zero touching small wildlife. Call what you want, but this isn't cruelty. It's pure, strategic, sustainable resource management. Keeping this ecosystem thriving is a must for me if I want a continuous supply of fresh materials. Hey, I'm just an environmentally conscious, undead sovereign. Whatever actually dared to attack us got instantly recycled into brand new squad members. Meanwhile, Greed and the wild skeletons had the process down to an exact science. The second we laid eyes on a target, he'd silently signal a squad to box them in, and have Pride flip him into our newest soldier, all without me having to say a single word. For half a day, the system ran completely on autopilot. That snowball effect was turning into an absolute avalanche with 300 soldiers. Out of nowhere, Imby stopped crying. 3 eyes? Spotting leaf veins from 100 meters out was totally child's play for him. He locked dead onto something up ahead. A dark cave emerged, and right outside of it, over 30 Tier 1 skeleton soldiers stood locked in a tight defensive formation. These weren't just random stragglers. Any organized squad meant there had to be a commander running the show. And a commander meant we were looking at some serious muscle hidden inside. I flicked my wrist forward, sending Pride charging in solo. What went down next wasn't really a fight. It looked more like a blender demonstration in action, against a Tier 3 berserker like him. Those Tier 1 grunts were basically thin tissue paper. Every single swipe of his massive greatsword sent bone shards flying everywhere like confetti. With every devastating swing, 30 guards were smashed into scattered debris in less than 60 seconds. Sauntering right up, I recycled a whole lot of them. 30 brand new recruits. Huge shout out for the free drop. Gluttony, take 80 soldiers. Sweep the cave. I wasn't about to get cocky and mess this up. That easy W outside could low-key be a trap, dropping his door-sized shield onto the stone with a deafening crash. Boom! Gluttony marched 80 troops straight into the suffocating shadows. 1 minute ticked by, then 2, total silence. Suddenly, his soul message pinged, "Sovereign, there's only one single skeleton inside." My soul fire flared instantly. Just one skeleton. You was bossing around 30-plus guards? Now that's a big fish. Pride, wrath, envy. Lust, you're with me. Everyone else, hold your ground out here. Heavy magical static hung thick in the air, mixed with a faint, sickly rotting stench. Bizarre, glowing runes had been violently carved straight into the cavern walls. I couldn't read a single glyph, but they gave off a major high-tier vibe. Right at the dead center of a massive stone chamber in the back, I spotted it, a dark gray skeleton, with blazing purple soul fire flickering viciously inside its eye sockets. A Tier 3 skeleton mage stood over a complex magic circle on the floor, pieced together from dozens of mismatched animal bones. It was right in the middle of an experiment, actively melting down, and reshaping a wolf skull using swirling tendrils of purple energy. Okay, now that right there is interesting. I wasn't scared at all. Honestly, I was hyped. This wasn't a fighter. This was a tech specialist. A literal researcher running their own dark R&D department. The mage finally caught sight of us and didn't waste any time with pleasant introductions. That purple fire suddenly shrank down before letting loose a nasty storm of shadow arrows right at us. Gluttony stepped up with a fierce roar and slammed his massive shield right in front of the whole squad. Bang, bang. Bang, bang. Those shadow arrows smashed against the barrier, like fireworks, leaving literally zero damage. Then Gluttony's shield pulled off a brand new trick. Every ounce of that absorbed energy funneled into one single point and blasted outward in a devour counter. A massive shockwave ripped straight through the chamber, kicking up thick dust and making the mage stumble hard. Right in the middle of casting, Wrath shot forward on his skeleton steed, moving like pure black lightning. His lance was aimed dead for the enemy's chest, while Pride leaped high into the air behind him, bringing his greatsword down with absolute apocalypse energy. Over by the cave entrance, Envy already had his bow fully drawn. His blue soul fire locked dead onto the mage's flickering core. A silent poison arrow cut through the darkness. And Lust, well look, the cave was crazy cramped, with teammates packed everywhere, so he couldn't really fire off spells without accidentally frying our own guys. Still, he couldn't let anyone think he was totally useless, so he just strolled around clutching his staff, hunting for an opening, and would just bonk the enemy mage right on the dome whenever he managed to get close. Staff bonk. Definitely the most low-key, iconic contribution to a boss fight. The mage fought desperately to put up a defense, conjuring a bone shield to block Wrath's charging assault, and dropping an illusion to mess with Pride's slash, crack. Wrath's lance punched clean through that hastily slapped-together bone shield, like it was made of cardboard, while Pride completely ignored the fake illusion. Guided by pure combat instinct, his greatsword sliced deep into the mage's left shoulder, almost cleaving it completely in half. Yet Envy delivered the final blow. His poisoned arrow threaded through every single gap in the mage's defenses and drilled straight into the center of the purple soul fire. Sizzle. The mage shrieked out, its soul fire flickering erratically before crashing hard to the ground. Fight over. Team Synergy wins, baby. I stepped forward and pressed my hand onto the mage's shattered skull and popped Undead Revival right then and there. A heartbeat later, a brand new tier 3 skeleton mage dropped to one knee before me, with purple flames blazing out of pure ride-or-die loyalty. I instantly placed it under Lust command. A mage managing another mage. Talk about peak professional synergy. Do you remember anything about this realm? About who you are? A total blank was bounced back through the soul link by the mage. Completely empty, pure amnesia. Every single memory got wiped clean, right through the death and revival grind. It could still sling magic like a pro, though its entire history was gone for good. Its original purpose, its old enemies, all vanished. A factory reset on its brain. The W, guaranteed loyalty. The L, zero intelligence value. I just shrugged off the setback, whatever. It doesn't matter if you're built fancy or plain. If you can grind, you stay on the clock. Even so, this random encounter spiked my radar big time. If a random cave tucked deep in the woods is hiding a tier 3 mage, just what else is lurking out here in the shadows? What's even waiting past these tree lines? Time to run a full sweep. Listen up, all units. This dim cavern is officially our new main base of operations. Scatter out and fan across every single direction. Draft every wild skeleton you bump into. Take out any threat that pops up. I want this entire forest speaking only one language. OU-RS. 2 solid days of all-out warfare followed right after. My undead swarm flooded across the woodlands like a flash flood. Monster lairs and hidden beast territories, alongside scattered skeleton clans, were smashed and absorbed whole. 500, 800, hitting 1,000 by the time I rallied the crew back together. I was staring down 1,200 tier 1 skeleton foot soldiers. And then came the absolute plot twist of the day. The foot soldiers, who fought under different commanding generals, were mutating down entirely separate paths. Under Pride, they morphed into heavy-hitting skeleton swordsmen. Under Gluttony, absolute shield tanks. under envy, sharp-eyed skeleton archers. The specific combat style of the general was directly driving their evolution route. I decided to test this out on the spot, and immediately grabbed a fresh-out-of-the-oven newborn skeleton. For a single battle, I dropped it into Raph's cavalry division, then swapped it over to Greed's construction crew. Right before the evolution results dropped, instead of turning into a cavalry unit, its bones got significantly denser, and its hands bulked up into a builder skeleton. Man, I can actually control their evolution paths now, because my soul fire went absolute supernova. Gone are the days of the generic zombie horde. Specialized divisions, like swordsmen and archers, are fully under my control, along with tanks, cavalry, builders, and mages. It's a legit professional army complete with roles and specializations. Reality hit hard as soon as the initial hype wore off, leaving me with 12 soldiers, 6 generals, and 1 super ugly base camp. We've got the army down, so now the infrastructure has to catch up. Back at Deadbone Village, the old chief finally made his way back, running for days on 0 sleep like an absolute legend. He was covered in scratches with cracked, bleeding lips, looking straight up like death warmed over. Screaming for everyone to run, he burst straight into the village, warning that Iron Fortress was coming to slaughter them all, staring at him like he had completely lost his marbles. The remaining dozen villagers muttered, "Wait, didn't you leave to join Iron Fortress in the first place? And where's everyone else you took with you?" Grabbing the nearest guy's arm in desperation, the chief pleaded with bloodshot eyes that there was no time to explain, because they were coming, but nobody moved an inch. The people who trusted him unconditionally had already shipped out with him previously, leaving behind only the hardened skeptics and stubborn ones. Stepping forward, a woman cradling her baby challenged him. "You took half our village away, and now you return alone telling us to run once again. So how do we know you didn't sell them out?" Every single word struck the old man like a physical blade. He knew nothing he could say would make a difference, since his credibility was shot and his people were dead, while the killers were literally riding this way right now. Running on his absolute last shred of rational thought, he blurted out the most unhinged suggestion imaginable. "Into the forest. You guys need to head into Deadbone Forest," prompting everyone's jaws to drop in disbelief at his insanity, since actual undead monsters lurk in there. Yet the chief's frantic logic was secretly genius, given that heavy cavalry can't maneuver through dense woods, and no sane person would ever expect villagers to flee straight into an undead zone, keeping the knights from looking there. And most of those forest skeletons were just low-key weak, newborn sketchy as hell, but definitely not an automatic L. Paradoxically enough, the woods turned out to be the safest zone, yet putting any of this into words was beyond him. After days of sprinting on 0 sleep, and carrying the heavy mental load of seeing his people get completely clapped, his system finally completely shut down. His vision went entirely blank, and he face-planted hard right into the muddy ground. Dead silence hung heavy as everybody stared blankly at each other. Then that massive dude who had been grilling him the hardest clenched his jaw and muttered a harsh curse under his breath, before hoisting the knocked-out chief onto his back and declaring, "Fine, one last time for real. But if this guy's capping, I'm shoving an apple pie so far up his." They bolted straight into the thick woods, barely seconds after they vanished beneath the canopy. Heavy hoof beats came thundering into the settlement. Sir Kyle rolled up with his knights in tow, with Hams riding right beside them. Hams caught sight of the empty village and felt a wave of relief wash over him, even if just a tiny bit, and immediately jumped at the opportunity. "Sir, I honestly might have been away way too long. Maybe this place was already deserted to begin with, and those folks we ran into on the road were literally everyone left." Cal stayed silent while his knights dismounted to sweep the area. One of them rushed back reporting, "Sir, the hearth is still warm and the stew in the pot just barely cooled off. They split just minutes ago." Cal turned his gaze slowly toward Hams, wearing that signature, creepy, skin-crawling smile, asking, "Where on earth do you think they headed, Hams?" Hams's heart skipped several beats. He knew damn well the only actual danger around was the forest itself, meaning the villagers logically must have bolted in the opposite direction, heading straight for Iron Fortress. Yet he pointed his shaky finger toward the woods anyway. "They most likely wandered into Deadbone Forest, sir." Cal's smile only widened as he saw right through the obvious lie, though he decided to let it slide. having a few traumatized survivors stumble out of the woods later to spill their sob stories to the Empire would honestly play out way better than just finding corpses. Living witnesses make top-tier propaganda material after all. And for Hams, an aspiring honorary knight, granting a tiny favor cost him absolutely nothing. Time to clean this mess up, murmured the knights as they tossed several medals, stamped with the holy theocracy's insignia straight down into the thick mud. Just some freshly planted fake evidence. Out of nowhere, a blazing torch was hurled straight into a thatched roof. Instantly, the entire village went up in literal flames. Thick black smoke clawed at the gray sky. Casually pointing his horse toward the forest, Kyle rode off. He looked totally unbothered, just like a guy on a chill morning ride. Meanwhile, deep inside my territory, I was busy dragging yet another clueless skeleton out from a deep foundation pit. Somehow, this absolute clown thought it was smart to test the dirt density by slamming his own skull directly into the ground. Bro, where even is your site manager? Did he seriously teach you to check material quality with your face? Right then, 2 soul messages pinged my system at the exact same time. First came a heads up from the Pride Sovereign. 13 major NPCs just walked right into your domain. Then another alert dropped from the Wrath Sovereign. Cavalry incoming. Time to turn those stinky humans into high-key, aesthetic skeletons. Seriously, villagers and enemy riders showing up on my doorstep simultaneously. That is no coincidence. That is a full-blown raid. But here is the funny part they have no clue about. While they were wasting time playing their cringe political murder games, I was on a massive grind, and my army officially hit level 12. The heavy surge of energy from that milestone instantly boosted me to tier 3. I unlocked a fresh naming slot along with a brand new passive perk. As long as the king breathes, the army never truly dies. Providing I stay standing, every single one of my minions is guaranteed to come back, even if their soul fire gets completely snuffed out. Basically, I am now a walking, talking respawn server. Unlimited continues unlocked. I slowly stood up straight, my internal soul fire burning with a fierce blue glow. Suddenly, every single skeleton across the forest froze. Mid-swing, mid-dig, mid-haul, completely locked in place. Hundreds of hollow skull sockets snapped toward me in perfect synchronization. Out on the outer edges, Pride's elite squad melted quietly into the dark shadows, while further between the trees, Wrath's armored cavalry brought their skeletal mounts to an absolute dead halt. Even the eerie green soul flame breath fuming from the horses faded down to nothing. The entire deadwood forest grew dead silent. All 12 units locked in place without a single peep, waiting for one single command. Mine. All forces cut the chatter, operations off, take cover. I strolled over and claimed my makeshift wooden throne, which was really just an overgrown tree stump with main character energy. Dropping into a seat, I crossed my legs tight and leaned back, flexing like a king on his throne. My consciousness stretched out across the entire forest, peering through hundreds of eye sockets all at once. Right through one set of eyes, frightened villagers came stumbling through the thick undergrowth, with a big guy lugging the passed-out chief, and a terrified mother desperately clutching her shivering child. While through another set of eyes, Kyle and his squad of knights were riding into my woods at a chill, lazy trot. That fake, sympathetic grin still plastered right across his picture-perfect face, unbothered by literally anything. Tapping my skeletal fingers against the armrest of my throne. Click, click. Click, well. The whole squad has finally pulled up. Welcome to my domain, guys. Let's see what kind of performance you're about to drop. I leaned back further on my seat, as a dozen invisible soldiers surrounded 2 groups of humans, who had absolutely, positively no clue what they just walked into. That angry village flower guy, who chased me down on day 1, was actually trying to shield me from these exact people. And now these fools straight up strolled into the lair of the beast. They should have been terrified of this whole time. Wild how the universe works, right? The villagers suddenly stopped running. Of course, they actually stopped running, and decided to build a campfire right in my territory. These clowns lit a massive bonfire and just chilled around it, sharing snacks like they were on a cozy weekend camping trip. Thick smoke shot straight up like a giant neon sign screaming, "Hey murderers, we're hanging out right over here." Peeking through my skeleton scout's eye sockets, I watched Kyle spot that plume of smoke. Even his usually composed face twitched with pure annoyance, giving total "are you for real right now" vibes. Hams was low-key screaming on the inside, considering that guy had specifically pointed the knights toward the forest, just to rescue these exact villagers, only for these gorgeous idiots to practically be setting off fireworks. Kyle's entire cavalry charged aggressively toward the smoke, prompting the villagers to catch sight of them and instantly scatter like scared rabbits. Classic move, and then Kyle dropped the order. Show mercy to nobody. A mother, cradling her baby, was targeted by a knight raising his blade, clutching her terrified child close. Down swept the weapon in a shining arc, before Pride's skeletal hand burst straight through the dirt and gripped the horse's ankle with a loud crash. Down went the horse while the knight went flying. Out of the earth rose a single-armed skeleton, acting like a main character in a horror movie. He brushed himself off, glanced at the baby, and then glared at the knight. Glanced at the panicked knight. Instantly, a massive, great sword materialized in his grasp, spanning 2 meters of lethal barbed bone, materializing right behind the knight, before the poor guy could even register what was happening. The unfortunate knight was staring at his own severed body from the outside. Dripping with pure contempt, Pride's voice echoed. Miserable insects, who lack even basic comprehension of sustainable development, have the absolute nerve to pollute the sovereign's territory. That statement sounded low-key extra dramatic, yet I'll let it slide since he learned from the best. This served as my cue, because through envy's sharp eagle eyes, the entire situation had already been scouted out by me. Only a pathetic tier 2 stood as their strongest player, while everyone else was total cannon fodder. Now came the time to drop the curtain as skeletons swarmed everywhere, surging from underground and creeping from behind trees, dropping straight down from the shadows of the upper canopy. Hundreds appeared with bone, swords drawn, and heavy bone shields raised high. Their identical cold soul fires burned intensely, locking down the perimeter tightly like a vicious trap snapping shut. Kyle's expression finally shattered. That signature compassionate smile of his completely vanished. I could practically hear his brain glitching out in real time. Why on earth are there so many ranked skeletons here? Where could they possibly have spawned from? Weren't the Night Orders supposed to have wiped them all out? Right then reality hit him hard. Multiple overwhelming auras far surpassing Tier 2 surged forth. Tier 3 forces, multiple Tier 3s at once, stationed within a random backwater forest, which honestly shouldn't house anything tougher than wild. Newborn skeletons, welcome to my home, my friend. Hem didn't even waste a second. The very moment my army came into view, he whipped his horse around and booked it back the way he came, at maximum sprint speed, showing absolute zero loyalty to Kyle, NGL. Props to that genius move, low-key smart. Sensing Ham's escape, Kyle instantly snapped back into full commander mode. Fall back, we're breaking through. Too late for that, Wrath. Right alongside his elite bone cavalry, they had already cut off the exit completely. Their dark bone armor gleamed ominously, lances locked at the ready, forming an impenetrable wall of skeletal riders, keeping them away from freedom. Without breaking a sweat, Wrath dispatched just a single standard skeleton horseman to run down Hams. Literally just one, because honestly, that was totally all it took. Kyle, to his credit, pulled his head back in the game real quick. He rallied his scattered knights together into a tight, aggressive charging formation. This was going to be one last desperate, do-or-die push for the Empire. They smashed straight into my skeleton barrier like a steel fist, tearing right through wet paper. Their swords sliced through Tier 1 skeletons effortlessly, leaving shattered bones and collapsed bodies in their wake. Yet a second later, those same broken bodies reassembled and popped right back up on their feet. As long as the king breathes, the army never dies, courtesy of my Tier 3 domain ability, meaning that as long as I'm around, my soldiers are basically immortal. You can waste them, but they just keep coming back. Smash them into tiny pieces, and they instantly snap back together. My entire army operates on an endless respawn loop, running like a video game with 0 death penalties. Naturally, panic started creeping into the knights. Every single skeleton they managed to wreck just performed good as new. And to make matters worse, every fallen knight instantly got hit with dark, undead revival magic. Their own dead buddies stood right back up, with eerie soul fire burning in their eyes, did a full 180, and started jumping their former comrades. Can you even imagine fighting a battle where your own casualties literally turn into enemy reinforcements. Your forces keep shrinking while there's just multiply. With every single swing of your sword, you're just making their wall thicker. A heavy vibe of pure despair spread through their ranks like wildfire. Realizing this, Cal knew he had to wrap it up fast. Take out the leader, and the whole army crumbles. His sights locked straight onto Pride. That one-armed skeleton pulling off all the resurrections. Ah yeah, got it. Channeling his combat aura, he shot forward toward Pride at full speed, moving like a locked-on guided missile. A vicious arc was traced by his knight's long sword, targeting Pride's skull directly. A subtle tilt of Pride's head was made to the side. The fully powered Tier 2 attack completely missed him, feeling like a gentle breeze. Had I not given orders to Pride for capturing this guy alive, he'd already be turned into bone fragments. Instantly pivoting, Kyle flipped his grip to smash the pommel right toward Pride's ribs. Fast adaptation with some pretty decent technique there. Pride responded by kicking him, using one bone foot, moving at speeds several times faster than Kyle could track. It planted itself directly in his side with a loud boom. Flying sideways like a speeding cannonball, Kyle slammed hard into a tree trunk. His fancy, shining armor now featured a perfect footprint, dented straight into it as he coughed up blood, using his sword like a crutch. He was barely staying on his feet. The fight was over, totally one-sided. Not even close at all. Raising his one arm, Pride gave a dismissive wave. Every single remaining knight, barring Kyle and his 2 Tier 1 bodyguards, got completely swarmed as the screaming lasted about 3 seconds, followed by silence, and then those knights stood right back up, with soul fire burning inside new uniforms, bone white and walking calmly into my formation, like they had always belonged there. Watching his comrades unfold before him, the men he'd ridden with, fought alongside, and committed atrocities with, now standing up as my personal soldiers. His brain was literally buffering a blue screen of death. Behind those wide eyes, it was him and 2 bodyguards. That was genuinely all that was left. Just 3 living humans adrift in a sea of over 1,000 skeletons. My finger bones tapped rhythmically on my throne, deep in the forest, watching everything play out. Through 1,000 pairs of hollow, empty eye sockets. 3 total prisoners plus 1 fake holy knight, carrying blood on his hands and dark secrets in his head. This is about to be a low-key, very informative conversation. My boys dragged the 3 prisoners in swiftly, looking like they were carrying wet chickens, and dumped them right at the foot of my throne. Bringing up the rear came the 13 villagers next, being herded along by skeleton escorts. They were shaking so hard. Their teeth were literally chattering from where I stood. The moment my base came into view, hundreds of skeletons constructing houses, excavating foundations, and hauling lumber. Just like a giant undead construction crew. Their minds totally short-circuited, and upon gazing at me, perched on my fancy tree stump throne, with legs crossed, tapping my finger bones against the armrest, I could feel their knees going weak. Reaching Tier 3 somehow made my presence totally terrifying to living things, even though I wasn't even trying. I was just sitting here vibing. Oh, and a massive upgrade. My soul fire. Evolve enough for me to actually speak now. No more clacking my jaw like a busted puppet. Actual words, crystal clear pronunciation, meaning I finally have a voice and used it right away. Spill everything I want to know. My voice wasn't deafening, yet it carried this heavy death energy resonance that drilled straight into everyone's eardrums. Low-key dramatic, high-key sovereign. This is your only way out alive. Sir Kyle. That fake smiling snake dragged himself up from the dirt, spat blood, and gripped his sword hilt, still rocking that boot print dented deep into his chest armor. Vile undead. Do you seriously think an Imperial Knight would spill secrets to a life-defiling monster? I tilted my head, thinking it was brave, admirable even, but also majorly stupid. I didn't even bother replying. Just flicked my hand as Lust stepped forward. She strolled up to Kyle with the casual curiosity of a cat, inspecting a mouse. An invisible wave of psychic energy pulsed outward, leaving every living person in the vicinity feeling dizzy. The Empire is gonna avenge me. The Iron Fortress will roar for my blood. 2 skeleton soldiers grabbed the still screaming Kyle and hauled him away toward my gorgeous, yet hideous cabin as a blood-curdling shriek pierced the air, followed by total silence outside. for the 2 remaining bodyguards. Every single night, and villager instantly lost all color in their faces, looking like bleached printer paper or pale phantoms, turning whiter than my own skeleton frames. Then came your moment with a heavy thud, as both bodyguards crashed down to the earth so fast. Their kneecaps honestly must have shattered, with their foreheads pressed flat right into the dirt. Oh my Lord Supreme, Sovereign, we completely surrender and will spill every detail. Just let us serve you while sparing our pathetic lives. Brilliant, because I totally vibe with high efficiency. So I immediately kicked off the interrogation. Just how strong is your army when stacked against the rest of this realm? And break down your entire power system for me. A guy named Royd practically screamed the answer straight at me. We belong to the Iron Fortress Cavalry Unit, and across the entire Audrey Empire, we are merely counted as standard local militia. Yet back in Iron Fortress, we serve as the Lord's exclusive cavalry. So people definitely view us as kind of a big deal locally. Battle aura gets cultivated through intense meditation and strict physical training, and I'm a Tier 1 apprentice knight, while Rosen and Kyle were wait. Kyle used to be a Tier 2 formal knight. The rhythmic tapping of my finger abruptly ceased. Who is the strongest? The absolute strongest warrior we know is Viscount Andrew, the Lord of Iron Fortress, and he sits at Tier 3. Rosen chimed in quickly before Royd could keep talking, out of sheer terror of being considered useless. Though there are wild rumors claiming the Royal Knight Order over at the Imperial capital boasts Tier 6 beasts, though those are just unverified myths. What we can verify for a fact is that the Emperor's personal Lionheart Guard units are comprised entirely of Tier 5 fighters, no exceptions. The fire burning deep within my soul flickered thoughtfully. So the Master of Iron Fortress is a Tier 3 entity, placing him right on par with my own generals, which poses zero threat. Meanwhile, the Imperial capital has Tier 5, and potentially Tier 6, which actually commands some respect, though they're located miles away, making this solid intel. Truly exceptional intel for today. Starting now, you reside here within my growing undead empire, where your primary duty is educating all my citizens on your world's complete history, geography, politics, and standard general knowledge. Every single bit of it, as I let my tone drop to sub-zero chill. And should I ever catch you trying to pull a sneaky move, any shady motives or sneaky cover-ups, every single syllable was caught by me while their frames shook so intensely. They honestly looked like they were glitching out. Just 2 mortals staring down a skeleton, and realizing this walking corpse was packing way more brain power than any undead had any business having, let alone most regular humans they had ever run into. Yes, Royd. At your service. Yes. Rosen at your service. Foreheads slammed back against the dirt. Thunk, thunk. My gaze shifted to the gathering villagers. Does anyone here actually possess any useful skills? An awkward silence hung thick as nervous eyes darted all around. A stocky guy finally stepped out of the group, with his voice dropping to a shaky whisper. Oh man. I'm Paul, and I'm just a blacksmith. Though, honestly, I am totally garbage at it. Making basic hoes and rusty nails is literally all I can do. Perfect. A quick flick of my wrist was all it took. 10 skeleton soldiers instantly dropped the timber they were hauling, marched right over, and formed a neat little line directly in front of Paul. 10 towering skeletons, each one standing way taller than him, gripping bone blades while staring blankly through empty, glowing eye sockets. Meet your brand new apprentices. Time to train them in the art of metalworking. Paul stared up at those 10-armed skeletons, knowing they could easily snap him like a toothpick. His knees were shaking uncontrollably while his panic-stricken brain screamed out. What if they decide to ice me the second my teaching gig is over? Yet survival instincts quickly took over his rational side. Realizing this was his one and only shot, he dragged in a massive breath, clumsily mimicking the bodyguard's awkward kneeling posture, and squeaked out, "Blacksmith Paul at your service, good. Now the rest of you are on farming duty. Show my crew how to properly plow the fields, drop seeds, run the irrigation systems, the whole 9 yards." The remaining villagers figured, you know what? This skeleton literally saved our skins from those bloodthirsty murder knights. Plus, he hasn't wiped out a single person who actually cooperated. Honestly, not the worst overlord we could ask for. One by one, they dropped to their knees. Get them out of here and assign them to some vacant cabins. Skeleton soldiers herded my fresh batch of technical consultants straight toward the residential zone. Just like that, the Undead Empire officially just scored an HR department and a brand new R&D division, plus an entire agriculture department all in a single afternoon. Meanwhile, near the Dark Tree line, Hams was literally booking it for his dear life. That solo skeleton cavalry unit I had dispatched was hunting him right through the heavy timber, slipping past trunks like a pale phantom with relentless pacing, just as poor Hams felt completely hopeless and outmatched. Those rhythmic thudding steps ceased entirely, and he glanced back. The skeletal rider was simply standing there motionlessly, hanging back a full 100 meters with zero intent to chase, refusing to attack and just staring him down. Two blazing dots of soul fire burned fiercely through the shadows, locked dead center onto his terrified pupils. Letting him escape was completely intentional on my part. A traumatized survivor sprinting all the way back to Iron Fortress, frantically babbling about an actual undead horde that is totally free marketing and a massive warning shot. Ham locked eyes with those glowing blue flames, and something deep inside his psyche totally snapped. He mentally concluded right then that if being a proud knight meant going toe-to-toe with monsters like us, he would much rather farm dirt for the rest of his days. The bony rider abruptly wheeled around and trotted off. Master's commands always take absolute precedence, while Ham slumped over his saddle, completely wiped out like overcooked pasta, riding helplessly toward a tomorrow, where his hands would shake every time he gripped a steel hilt. Back on my makeshift throne, I rose to my feet and broadcasted my telepathic will across the valley. All personnel pull back to base camp because I got an update. The Undead Empire has officially secured intelligence assets, featuring human mentors, a local blacksmith, a bunch of farmers, and 12-foot soldiers. Day one of running a legitimate civilization is absolute vibes. 2,000 skeleton warriors were cramming every square foot of my valley, forming a massive sea of white bone reaching edge to edge, with well over half of them sitting at Tier 2, radiating that sleek, polished energy gloss. This entire battalion could easily wipe minor kingdoms off the map, and every single one of them was staring directly at me, perched comfortably cross-legged on my tree stump throne, waiting for my next directive. It is high time we evolve this circus into an actual superpower. Order of business number 1 is what everyone calls me. I shifted my weight on the wood and announced that starting now, it is strictly Lord or my Lord and nothing else. Because calling myself Undead Sovereign is basically slapping a giant target on my head. That literally screams final boss. Please form a raid party, and honestly no thank you. Lord keeps it low-key and spotless. Unfussy, totally refusing scream, come farm me for epic loot. Right away, my 6 General Soul Fires went totally wild, as they interpreted this move as deep level mastery and leadership and next-level humility. Such insane confidence. Picking such a low-key title proves true power, guys. Look, I just don't want random adventurers showing up. But hey, think whatever you want. Second, the humans living here are completely off-limits. My tone instantly dropped into dead seriousness. Not a single soul touches them without my green light. Here is the core thing you gotta grasp. They aren't built like you. Their heads actually fly off. When you lose your skull, you just grab it and click it right back. For them, once their soul fire goes out, it's permadeath forever. They're literally one-and-done consumable items. And I need the knowledge stored inside their brains, clear, loud and clear, my lord. Yes, Lord. 2,000 soul fires flashed in absolute synchronization. That rush of pure, unquestioned obedience slaps way harder than any massage I will ever physically feel. Third, this territory is officially dubbed the Eternal Night. Domain Eternal Night. The absolute realm of the dead, a kingdom that never shuts down. Mostly because we literally cannot sleep. Well, I fake a nap sometimes, but that's a whole different vibe. Now, I hereby call to order the 2nd Annual Eternal Night Awards Ceremony. Pushing up from my throne with a proud grin, I began pointing around. Stepping forward out of the ranks came the Tier 3 Berserker. His bloodlust aura radiated such intense pressure that the nearby Tier 1 skeleton soul fires flickered wildly like candles in a hurricane. Dropping to one knee, the most violently unhinged skeleton alive submitted like the humblest servant. You are hereby appointed General of the Punisher Corps, commanding 200 Tier 2 skeleton swordsmen. Everything for my lord. 200 of my sharpest, most aggressive swordsmen marched right out and locked into a lethal battle formation. Right behind him, absolutely radiating main villain energy, Ralph. The Black Knight trotted forward mounted on his skeletal warhorse, its hooves scorching the dark ground with blazing soul fire. Total show-off. General of the Fearless Charge. Corps, commanding 200 skeleton cavalry. Your every command is my absolute mission. 200 skeletal horsemen fell right into formation right behind him. The ground was shaking like crazy. Gliding forward, Lust the Skeleton Mage made her entrance. Serving as General of the Arcane Corps, she brought 300 Tier 2 soldiers alongside that Tier 3 mage we captured earlier, to act as your vice commander. Knowing your wisdom would totally light up the endless night. That's some fancy talk, but I'm totally vibing with it. 300 of my absolute sharpest-minded skeletons, slotted right into her ranks. Low-key sizing up Gluttony, the brand new boss. Stepping up as a walking fortress of bones, Gluttony made his move, while the earth shuddered beneath him. As General of the Divine Shield Corps, with 300 Tier 2 soldiers backing him up. Yeah, literally 300 of my most massive, beefy skeletons. They lined up right behind him, forming an unbreakable wall of bone nothing could ever pierce. Materializing up front like a ghost, Envy the Silent Sniper stepped out to take command as General of the Annihilation Corps. With 150 Tier 2 skeleton archers at his disposal, he declared that everything exists beneath your gaze. Though his voice was barely a whisper, it came through the soul link loud and crystal clear. 150 archers locked in behind him with cold, laser-focused eyes. Every single one a certified killer. Finally came the quiet one, Greed. The ghoul stepped forward out of the gloom, actually wearing real flesh on his bones, making him the only general who looked somewhat alive. You are hereby appointed as the Secretary of State of Eternal Night, taking full charge of the State Corps, with 50 Tier 2 soldiers and 800 Tier 1 soldiers. That sudden spike of 850 units blew past every other general's soul fire level, giving him an army way bigger than anyone else's. Secretary of State? What kind of wild title is that anyway? I totally ignored their confusion. Those 50 Tier 2 soldiers are essentially safety officers, tasked with supervising all construction standards. To keep safety progress rolling, I promoted a dozen standout soldiers to centurions distributed across all 6 corps. Boom, middle management was officially established, and the chain of command was totally locked down. Additionally, Greed will dispatch 200 Tier 1 soldiers down to the human settlement to pick up some farming skills, seeing as Greed handles all personnel assignments anyway. Greed gave a deep, respectful bow. Your will shall be executed with maximum efficiency, while his mind was already busy calculating land allocations, tool distributions, and crop rotation schedules. This guy was basically born for bureaucracy. I quickly cast my eyes over my 6 Punisher divisions. Cavalry, mages, shields, archers, and state affairs, with centurions in every single unit forming a legit organizational chart. That was when I dropped a total bombshell. Every centurion and above received a final order, stating that all 6 generals must spend daily hours down at the human camp, mastering their language, writing systems, and general knowledge about this world, leaving dead silence. Dismissed, I spun around and strode straight into my palace, leaving behind 6 commanders, whose internal soul fires were experiencing total system meltdowns. The exact second I left, they huddled up together for a low-key emergency meeting. Every single word was piped straight to me through the soul link. And oh man, their wild interpretations of my go learn from humans mandate were honestly priceless. Wrath took the floor first, visibly triggered. Learn from those. Frail meat bags that literally shatter if you just poke them. Envy, the cold intellectual snob, chimed in next, totally missing it. The Lord doesn't actually need us picking up random common knowledge. This is textbook reconnaissance. He wants us dissecting their anatomy, tracking their fears, mapping their weaknesses, and noting the range of motion in every single joint. The whole point is turning us into way more efficient killers. Then Lust, the master manipulator, scoffed. You're both too close-minded. Language is basically the vessel of thought, and writing is the bedrock of civilization. Master those skills, and we can hack their very souls, making them willingly simp for the eternal night, which is way more effective than just ruling through pure fear, added Gluttony. The simpleton of the group, figure out how to make them grow fatter, because chubbier humans just make better raw material to build more of us. Until pride, the absolute zealot, cut them off. You guys are all completely missing the vibe. The Lord wants us to go witness their pathetic little society with our own eyes, just to see how hilarious their so-called knowledge is when stacked against our absolute power. This exercise is meant to mega boost our faith in the Lord's supremacy. 5 wildly different takes. Each one completely wrong. Each one completely unhinged. And yet all of them painfully in character. Finally, everyone turned their gaze toward Greed, the Secretary of State, who commanded the biggest army and held the toughest job. Naturally, his verdict carried the most weight. Greed slowly looked over the active construction site and scanned the freshly plotted farmlands stretching out ahead. You got it all wrong, as all 5 soul fires suddenly froze solid. Domination, killing, and warfare are mere tools rather than the ultimate destination. Rather than a military, the Lord intends to establish an empire, capable of self-development and self-sustenance. Infinite expandability is the goal, whereas construction serves pure survival. Knowledge and energy are driven by agriculture, and replication is the sole purpose of learning. Their society must be understood and their technology copied before an undead civilization can finally be built, reaching a level of efficiency 10,000 times greater. That represents the true ambition held by the Lord, functioning merely as components of a machine rather than a standard army. With myself acting as the operator, keeping things running smoothly. Our purpose is to surpass humans, not to look down upon them, leaving absolute, deafening silence hanging in the air. All 5 generals experienced a simultaneous epiphany right then and there. Our previous blindness is put to shame by the unfathomable wisdom of the Lord. Every last one of us pledges absolute devotion to the rise of eternal night. 6 successive waves of fanatical loyalty crashed forcefully against my humble little cabin, deep within the shadowy confines of that dwelling. I lay resting inside my coffin-like bed with my legs crossed, deep in thought over a genuinely pressing dilemma. Should I instruct them to cultivate potatoes first, or perhaps corn? Meanwhile, across the realms of the living, Hems rode back, straight into Iron Fortress, looking like a feral beast dragged through a swamp by a furious grizzly, barely recognized by the bewildered gate guards, one of whom dropped a sarcastic remark regarding mud wrestling with wild boars while Hams just stared right past him, with that hollow, 1,000-yard stare, typical of someone who had just witnessed his peers getting recycled into disposable skeleton foot soldiers. An unsettlingly normal atmosphere greeted him inside the city walls, featuring merchants shouting out prices for their goods, blacksmiths rhythmically hammering metal, and a mouth-watering scent of fresh bread drifting from local bakeries, with children running riot through the narrow alleys, playfully whacking each other with makeshift wooden sticks, crying out proudly, "As an imperial knight, I shall strike you down, Dark Lord," while the other yelled, "Negative, you're the Dark Lord. Taste the wrath of my dark magic," before one kid playfully stabbed his buddy with a wooden blade, causing the pretend Dark Lord to tumble dramatically as they both burst into laughter. Hems observed the whole scene with his knuckles turning ghostly white around his sword hilt, fully aware that those kids were merely playing make-believe over an impending threat that was entirely real and terrifyingly close by, even though absolutely no one else in this city had a single clue. Without wasting a single second, he marched straight over to the Lord's manor. Thick, plush carpets welcomed him into a ridiculously lavish chamber, where stuffed animal heads mounted the walls, and a ridiculously expensive incense was working overtime, desperately trying to clear out the funky, lingering scent of Hamza's completely exhausting week. Viscount Andrew occupied the space behind a massive oak desk, not even sparing a glance up from his paperwork as he dropped the news, "Mission done." Why didn't Kyle report in person? He's getting sloppy. Hems knelt the mission. Succeeded, my lord. Deadbone Village is eliminated. Then why do you look like that? Where's Kyle? Baron Kyle is dead, Sir. Hems forced the words out. We encountered an undead catastrophe in Deadbone Forest. A sudden, bone-chilling freeze swept across the room. Undead catastrophe. Andrew leaned forward, his eyes cutting like glass. You know the weight of those words. Explain countless ranked undead, alongside multiple Tier 3 entities. Every single syllable sucked a bit more life out of Hamza's battered body. Kyle and 2 bodyguards, all wiped out in action. Andrew fell dead silent, his fingers tapping a steady, rhythmic beat against the desk, creating the only sound in the tense space. Save for Hamza's heavy breathing. You'd better not be spinning lies to cover up a botched mission. You know what happens. Every word is absolute truth, my lord. I saw it firsthand. They're coordinated and totally disciplined. Pulling off actual ambushes. This isn't just random, undead nonsense. It's a full-on army. Andrew scrutinized his eyes for a long moment. Before summoning his butler straight out of the shadows, some guy named Hal, who materialized out of thin air like a jump scare in a horror movie. Andrew started firing off commands like machine gun rounds. Dispatch the adventurers. Guild with a silver rank scouting mission 2. Investigate Deadbone Forest. Send troops out to the forest. Periphery to track down Kyle's sword or family crest. Whether breathing or not, I demand proof, and if you come up empty-handed, just drag back some charred timber and smashed armor. Textbook evidence fabrication, and for the grand finale, spin the narrative that Sir Kyle valiantly battled theocracy invaders at Deadbone Village and gave his life, shielding imperial citizens. Get the local bards to make it sound epic. This is an Earl-tier operation, so don't half-ass any of it. Giving a sharp bow, the butler melted right back into the darkness. Freakishly efficient. Flicking his wrist, Andrew sent a small metal badge skidding across the desk, which came to a dead halt right in front of Hamza. Behold, your grand prize. An honorary knight, dripping with pure disgust, carrying 0 land. And 0 paycheck, but totally low-key clutch for. Flexing at the local tavern. And bragging about until the end of time. He scrunched up his face in total disdain. Now get lost because your stank is straight up ruining my expensive incense. Hems pocketed the badge, feeling the chilly metal against his palm, and walked out without a peep. Glaring daylight hit him hard outside. Opening his fist, he locked eyes with the badge. An honorary title bought by selling out his entire hometown. Funded by the blood of neighbors who used to grab drinks with him. And that sweet little kid who always begged him for candy. He headed back home. A compact, weathered double-decker house tucked in the slums. Shoving the door open to the rich aroma of home cooking. "You're back," called a sweet voice echoing from the kitchen. "Starving? Dinner is almost ready." Hems froze right in the doorway, keeping totally silent as the spatula and noises died down. A young woman named Lilia stepped out to greet him, still gripping a kitchen knife, but the moment she spotted Hams, she completely softened, dropping the blade on the counter, taking in his trashed clothes and dead, hollow eyes. She skipped the interrogation completely, walking straight up to wrap her arms around him in a tight hug, one hand gently tracing circles on his back. "You made it home, and that is literally all that counts." Hems completely broke down, burying his face in her shoulder while his whole body trembled. All the suffocating terror, the crushing guilt, and the nightmare of the past week came pouring out as silent, heavy tears that soaked right through the fabric of her shirt. They held onto each other tightly until the kitchen started reeking of smoke. Oh no, the food. They scrambled like crazy toward the stove together, trying desperately to salvage whatever was left of what looked like a charcoal sculpture. Scraping away the burnt bits, Hems asked quietly, "Lilia, if I told you an entire undead horde was marching to wipe out Iron Fortress, would you pack up and leave with me?" Her hands kept moving across the pan, while her tone dropped into dead seriousness. "I totally believe every single word you say, Hams. But running away is just not an option." "Why?" A flash of sadness crossed her eyes. "I gave my dad my word before he passed away, promising I would marry an actual knight of Iron Fortress. Somebody sworn to protect this city because my entire life and my roots are right here. All my precious memories live in this place." Hems slowly reopened his hand. Under the dim kitchen illumination, the honorary knight badge flickered, with a rather faint, exhausted glow. Turning around, Lilia gazed into his eyes gently and whispered, "Does this make me a knight?" before offering a soft, reassuring kiss right on his cheek. "Of course, you've always been my knight." Hams, letting out a low sigh, kept his thoughts to himself, while silently clearing away the charred dinner, to start whipping up a fresh meal instead. A dude wearing a badge he never actually earned, low-key, carrying a blood-soaked title, failing to save the one woman that mattered, big yikes. Plus a massive secret regarding my army that absolutely no one in this whole town was going to take seriously. Until it was way too late, my guy. Sorry, Hams. Honestly, you just seem like a decent guy who got dealt the absolute worst possible hand in life. Meanwhile, I got 12 skeletons. Busy learning how to farm potatoes right now, and not gonna lie, your drama is totally above my pay grade. The ongoing farming education program was progressing precisely, as disastrously as you would expect, with one local villager, named Buck, now proudly serving as Eternal Night's top agricultural consultant, standing over a fresh dirt hole, with a completely defeated and bewildered expression on his face. Because resting right down inside that very hole, one of my Tier 1 skeleton soldiers was lying down and just straight up, chilling, cozily positioned in the planting trench, as if he were taking a peaceful afternoon nap inside a coffin. Sir Skeleton, that's not how you put the seeds into the dirt hole. You're not supposed to put yourself in there. The skeleton casually adjusted, his posture to get a bit more comfortable, his soul fire burning, completely chill and serene. Look, I'm just a little skeleton. I literally don't understand your complicated words. Buck didn't dare press the issue further, especially since just yesterday, another frustrated villager lost his patience entirely and screamed at his lazy skeleton student, only to get bonked squarely on the head 3 times with a heavy hoe handle. Not hard enough to cause serious physical injury, but traumatic. Enough to guarantee a lifetime of terrifying nightmares about being disciplined strictly by a walking pile of bones. Then, sweet salvation finally arrived in the form of a Tier 2 safety officer, proudly rocking the ivory bone badge strapped to his upper arm. The very second that slacking skeleton spotted his strict supervisor heading over, he launched himself straight out of that dirt hole like a startled rocket, snatched the farming hoe right out of poor Buck's hands, and started aggressively clacking his jaw at the terrified villager with total nerve. Why on earth didn't you dig me out sooner, bro? Now I'm completely falling behind on my core agricultural studies. The nerve of that skeleton, literally blaming the teacher for his own nap. Absolute main character energy, SMH. Ignoring Buck completely, the safety officer didn't even blink. Grabbing the lazy slacker by the collar, he marched him straight to a specially designated patch of land, known as the re-education zone, which I personally set up digging a skeleton-sized hole, before planting the offender vertically right into the dirt like a turnip, packing the earth tight with only one sad skull poking out. Every single skeleton on the farm witnessed this brutal display, instantly transforming into the most dedicated agriculture students in history with flawless hoe angles, exact seed spacing, and textbook hole depths, where not a single one even dared to look at a worm sideways. Watching a bare skeleton head stare blankly up at the sky from its earthen prison, Buck swallowed hard, realizing this undead nation is low-key built different. Meanwhile, inside the officer education building, things are going off the rails in a major way as a loud slam, a bone fist smashing against the table, nearly cracked the wood in half. Why do I gotta give back whatever I conquer by force? Ralph, my Tier 3 skeleton knight, was having a massive meltdown over the whole concept of private property. His blazing red soul fire practically melting the 2 human teachers sitting right across from him, as Rosen and Royd, my former prisoners turned elite professors, shook so violently they could barely string 2 words together. Gee, General, it's just the basic rule of human society. The fundamental concept of private property. Basic, only the Lord holds the right to absolute ownership. They had finally learned through trial and error never to tell these generals, you should do this, but rather phrasing it as, doing this directly benefits the Lord, which was the ultimate cheat code. Everything had to loop right back to me, explaining that if you steal someone's daily bread, they starve and harbor deep resentment, and if everyone resorts to stealing, no one bothers to bake bread anymore, leading to mass starvation. That ends up wiping out potential recruits for the Lord's empire. As Wrath's wildfire flickered uncertainly, he realized that logic actually checked out. Just as the suffocating tension began to clear up a bit, a voice dripping with pure sarcasm echoed from the doorway. How utterly pathetic, failing to grasp something so elementary. Pride was casually leaning against the doorframe, having no class today, and simply dropping by to be his usual toxic self. Let's just hope that empty skull of yours doesn't end up sabotaging the Lord down the line. Shifting from red to deep crimson, Wrath's soul fire flared aggressively, and he stood up with such sudden, explosive force that his heavy wooden chair completely shattered beneath him. I'd never normally bother the Lord, but right this second, You're totally getting dragged into this, as Pride swaggered in casually, with his massive sword materializing right in his grip. Oh, you really think you can throw hands while the Lord isn't even here? I'm literally invincible. So come to me, bro. As Wrath slammed his foot down, the floor literally splintered apart, and his skeletal warhorse burst straight out from the underground shadows with a soul fire shriek. Vaulting onto its back, he aimed his lance dead at Pride's skull, while crackling death energy boiled inside the cramped classroom. 2-tier, 3 powerhouses totally ready to throw down in a wooden shack. Rosen and Royd were huddled tightly in the corner, shivering like terrified quails just waiting to bite the dust. That's when my voice sliced through the heavy tension like a razor. Your building happens to be the loudest spot across the entire territory. I sent you guys here to learn just one thing. It's always either a hurricane or a thunderstorm going off in here. Instantly, every single ounce of killing intent in that room evaporated, looking like someone popped a balloon with a sharp needle. Both generals dropped straight to the floor on one knee simultaneously, exhibiting creepy synchronization as they gasped, "My lord! My lord!" Standing in the doorway, I glared at the demolished chair, the shattered floorboards, and the 2 human instructors, who were basically 2 seconds away from total cardiac arrest. My internal soul fire was thumping hard, and without uttering another word, I strode forward, reached out with both hands, grabbed Pride by his spine, and Wrath by the back of his neck, hoisting them up effortlessly like a couple of misbehaving kittens. 2-tier, 3 killing machines, offering 0 resistance whatsoever. Not because they couldn't fight back, but because they wouldn't dare, since my will is absolute law, even if that very law dictates that I'm going to wipe you out of existence. "Lord, my lord," they whimpered, tiny confused soul fires flickering as they looked up at me, carrying them straight outside. I marched right past the farm, bypassing the safety officer and all the hard-working skeletons, who froze in shock to watch their supreme ruler casually hauling 2 generals around like a couple of heavy grocery bags. Reaching the designated re-education zone, I dropped them right beside the turnip skeleton before personally digging out 2 separate holes, with my finger bones slicing through dirt like spinning drills, achieving perfect dimensions and exact depths. I picked up Wrath, planted him firmly, picked up Pride, planted him too, packed the dirt nice and tight, boom, totally done. 3 skeleton heads planted neatly in a row, breaking through the dirt beneath the warm afternoon sun. On the left side hangs the OG tier 1 slacker, just chilling and staring at the clouds, totally living his best life without a single care in the middle. Wrath's soul fire is blazing wild, radiating pure. This is totally your fault energy straight toward Pride on the right, where Pride's soul fire flickers in pure confusion. Loki going through some serious soul searching. I stood back to admire my absolute masterpiece. 3 turnip-style skulls lined up neatly, giving a proud nod. Turning toward the safety officer, I watched him tremble so intensely his bones were literally rattling. Watch them closely, and if anyone dares crawl out before sunset, snap their legs right back and bury them deep, clack. That poor safety officer's soul fire almost blew up from sheer hype. The Lord himself just handed him a VIP mission to babysit 2 generals. This had to be the major flex of his entire undead career, starching right in front of the 3 skulls. He locked into strict attention with his chest puffed out, ready to throw down his life for this holy gig. I turned on my heel and strolled back to my palace, retiring straight to my coffin bed because running a brand new empire is exhausting. Out there in the open field, the trio of turnip heads had a moment, as the tier 1 skeleton on the left pivoted toward Wrath, then shifted to Pride. He gave his jaw a single click. "Clack, what's good, new neighbors?" Wrath's fire dimmed down a notch, muttering hello while Pride's flame flickered with a quiet hey, before both generals whipped around to glare at each other. "Who gave you permission to copy my vibe?" "I was just answering a coworker's polite greeting." "That has 0 to do with you. Talk about toxic." "Acting with 0 general decorum." "Seriously? You calling me toxic? I'll fry your skull down to powder right now." "Oh yeah, try it. Let's see if your little flame gets to me before I totally crush your pathetic soul." Meanwhile, the tier 1 skeleton on the left completely tuned out their argument to gaze up at the passing clouds overhead, realizing getting buried in the dirt wasn't even that bad. It felt surprisingly chill, even if it was a bit awkward for a full skeleton. Out in the wider world, guests were finally pulling up to tour my forest. How iconic. Leading the pack was a guard patrol straight from Iron Fortress, prowling around the crispy remains of Deadbone Village. Their captain, a dude named Davos, was clearly the only one in the squad with a brain that worked, because he managed to spot those theocracy badges, embedded deep within the sticky muck by Kyle's cronies. One was scooped up, given a once-over, and his expression said all. This is the most blatant piece of staged evidence ever witnessed, way too spotless and convenient, these aristocrats. Slack off on dirty deeds like lazy slackers copying homework. Yet did Davos actually spill the real truth? Hell no, he secretly pocketed a badge for himself. Big brain moved securing insurance before grabbing another badge and roughing it up to seem legit, grinding it down into the ash with his combat boot heel, to give it that gritty, battle-tested vibe, then instructing his squad to bag the rest as official proof. This guy wasn't even conducting a real probe. He was low-key polishing the ultimate cover story, fully aware of what actually went down, and precisely what his boss wanted fed to him. Absolute survival tactics. 10 out of 10, right before they rolled up to my woods. Just lingering on the outer fringe for now. My actual heavy units had already pulled way back inside, leaving only the bare minimum patrolling the edges. A handful of stray skeletons I deliberately couldn't be bothered to upgrade, all yellow-toned and dirt-caked, shuffling around like old grandpas serving as walking decoys. The guards quickly smashed a couple with their halberds, total pushovers crumbling apart like soggy cardboard. This exact weak display spooked honorary night hams, prompting a snicker from one guard, though Davos stayed stone-faced, because his gut caught a vibe nobody else picked up on. It was way too quiet, missing all wildlife and chirping birds. Zero bugs in a forest this massive should be buzzing with life. Instead, it sat completely dead silent like a crypt, because every single living thing had either booked it out of there or got swallowed up by my horde. The ecosystem wasn't empty by sheer coincidence. It was barren because I swept the whole place clean. Davos felt that creepy prickle shooting up the back of his neck, sensing something staring right through him from a dark. Forget this, we are getting out of here right now. Let the Adventurers Guild deal with the heavy investigation. Our sole mission is dropping off this report to the Viscount. He hastily scooped up some shattered bone shards from a destroyed wild skeleton decoys, tucked them tightly into a cloth bundle, calling it hard proof of Kyle's legendary final heroic stand. Probably before marching his crew out without a backward glance. Smart move, honestly very smart, because another few hundred meters would have dropped him right into my actual frontline forces. 12 elite ranked soldiers lurking deep in the shadows, tracking his every single move through hollow, glowing eye sockets. The scattered remains crushed right after departure by his crew. Those exact fragments drifted down into the soil silently and vanished, completely absorbed. Back into my network. Major props for the leftovers, boys. A fresh batch of visitors, consisting of a 5-member adventurer crew named Silver Moon, marched toward my woods on a reconnaissance gig. Their tank, a hulking wall of muscle called Boar, was strutting around like he literally owned the place. This gig is way too easy. Just a basic silver rank scouting run. I could totally crush this solo, according to their Captain Caden, who actually packed some legit survival instincts. Hand glued to his hilt while his eyes scanned every shadow. Ella, their mage, was the paranoid one of the bunch. The commission was highlighted in bold red ink, specifically demanding confirmation of Tier 2 or higher undead. If we actually bump into one, walking out alive is basically 0. Boar brushed her off with a Tier 2, so what attitude? All 5 of us are Tier 1 plus the captain's Tier 2. Even a Tier 3 would sweat against us. Oh, Boar. You sweet, clueless, muscle-bound bro. My roster features 6 Tier 3 generals and 12 soldiers. Your confidence is hilarious, yet dangerously delusional. Finn, their scout, acted as a silent knife polisher who barely uttered a word. Oral, a young priestess serving as their healer, had totally spaced on bringing healing potions. Again, apparently, since the captain sighed that. This is the absolute last time, while the mage groaned. You said that exact same thing last time, classic. Bringing a healer with 0 med kit straight into undead turf. This crew is basically a comedy sketch on legs. They drifted past the fallen villagers, slaughtered previously by Kyle's squad, with arrows sticking out everywhere and dried blood staining the ground. Flies buzzed around as Ella took a quick glance and looked away. Not our circus, Not our monkeys, Finn muttered coldly. Oral wanted to say a prayer for them, but kept her mouth shut. Caden waved everyone forward. They all pretended nothing was wrong. Rule number 1 of adventurer survival: never ask questions. About corpses pinned with Imperial military arrows. They were marching straight toward me. A 5-person party featuring 1 Tier 2 and 4 Tier 1 fighters. Stuffed with pure main character syndrome. And a healer who completely forgot her potions. Stumbling right into my domain. I was kicking back inside my coffin bed when their vibes. My perimeter scouts caught the signal loud and clear. Creeping in from the west were 5 breathing targets. I didn't even bother sitting up. Let's see how far they get before they realize. This isn't your average silver rank mission. It's straight up an early retirement plan. A few days later, I had visitors. On the forestry exit road, the Silver Moon Squad crossed paths with Davos's patrol. Patrol on the road, out of the forest. Davos threw out a casual warning, just some fresh skeletons. Watch your step, and kept on marching. That peak, not my problem, any more energy was radiating off him. Bore the tank was flexing hard inside his gear. Hearing that made him puff right up like a rooster. See, even the guards handled it easy. This is going to be an absolute joke for Silvermoon. Shut your trap, or. Stay frosty, Captain. Caden's hands stayed glued to his pommel. Gotta hand it to him, I'm low-key feeling this guy. Even though he's totally gonna regret walking in here. Now that they've stepped into my woods, here's the deal. I purposely scattered some dummy skeletons. Right along the outer edges. Those yellow-boned, dirt-caked, shuffling grandpa models. They're just decoys, speed bumps, and tourist traps. For the first couple of hours. Silvermoon was having the absolute time of their lives. Boar didn't even bother swinging his shield around. He just bumped into skeletons, and they shattered instantly. Crushing skulls underneath his boots like bubble wrap, thinking this is it. This is the legendary, terrifying, undead threat. Their scout Finn actually noticed something off, though. There were 0 animal tracks anywhere, just skeletal footprints. And those same skeletons were just wandering around completely aimlessly. That's because the real squad was posted up way deeper inside. Fully organized, locked in, and definitely not wandering. 2 hours later. After smashing maybe 80 or 100 of my dummy units, they were starting to get super bored until Finn threw up a silent fist. Dead silence fell as he parted the thick bushes ahead. 50 of my Tier 2 skeleton swordsmen were holding down the clearing, moving together in pristine formation, systematically wiping out a bunch of wild skeletons. Gleaming white bones and matching bone swords on display. Every single strike synchronized, every block locked down tight. Those wild skeletons were getting harvested like wheat fields. Once the cleanup was done, a few of the swordsmen gathered up the leftover bone pieces and hauled them straight back toward my base, while the rest held down their defensive positions. Even the disciplined pro Boris dropped his guard, as that smug grin vanished for the first time all day, man. 50 Tier 2s? That's low-key a whole squad. Finn chimed in, dropping that terrifying reality check. With a clear agenda driving them, those bones were being gathered on purpose. Instead of just wandering around aimlessly, Caden's face went ghost white instantly. Because the truth I already knew finally hit him hard. Those 50 swordsmen weren't even my actual army. Acting instead as a cleanup crew, basically glorified janitors. Fall back right now. Smart move, Caden. You might actually live through this gig. They pivoted to sneak away in absolute silence, only for 50 skulls to snap toward them in terrifying, flawless unison. Every single head rotated simultaneously to lock onto their hiding spot. Spotting us made them bolt without a second thought. Boar's shield blocked the rear to keep them covered, while the mage frantically chanted speed buffs, looking like she was ready to break down in tears. The priestess rounded out the classic panic formation. Hot on their heels came my relentless swordsmen, their skeletal feet hammering the dirt in a synced rhythm that echoed like a nightmare through the quiet woods. Right here is where it gets wild, though. After sprinting for about half an hour, most of my skeletons froze right at the outer perimeter. Standing orders had already been given. Keep an eye on intruders and push them out, never chasing past the borderline. With those humans retreating, mission was officially accomplished. Except one stubborn swordsman refused to stop. It wasn't attacking, just keeping a fixed distance, pacing steadily behind them, like a creepy skeletal shadow. What is it even doing? The priestess whimpered under her breath. Tracking us, or leading us into a trap, Finn hissed, ice in his voice. That was when Caden cooked up what he thought was a genius plan. Let's capture it alive. Are you out of your mind? The maid shrieked. Think of the absolute flex. A living tier, 2 skeleton swordsmen is priceless. Drag this back to base, and the whole Iron Fortress goes DEFCON 1. Okay, credit where credit's due, I'll give him that. From his POV, this was some serious 200 IQ tactical thinking. Snag a specimen, prove the threat is real, and roll up as the main character. From my POV, however, you just straight up kidnapped one of my employees. Not gonna lie, they executed that ambush flawlessly. Finn completely melted into a tree's shadow, turning into basically human camouflage, while the other 4 pretended to flee and slowed down to act as bait. Just as my swordsman strolled past Finn's tree, out of nowhere, the scout dropped down with a hammer, aimed straight for the neck joint. Luckily, my boy was rocking tier 2 swordsman stats, so he didn't even bother looking back before ducking, instantly counter-slashing behind him at a totally wild angle. Finn barely managed to dodge that one, before Caden and Boar rushed in from both flanks. Boar's shield slammed hard right into my swordsman's ribs, while Caden locked his sword around the weapon wrist, and twisted hard, crack, sending the sword dropping, without skipping a beat. My soldier ditched the weapon and went completely barehanded, clawing at Caden's face with 5 razor-sharp finger bones. That priestess chick, the one who totally forgot her potions earlier, actually clutched up big time. She splashed holy water all over my swordsman, causing it to sizzle and smoke on contact while slowing his movements way down. Then the mage jumped into the fray with a holy water-soaked rope, and tied him up tighter than a holiday turkey, having successfully bagged Unit 108 of Punisher Corps, 3rd Patrol Division. They booked it out of there like their lives depended on it, which they totally did. Meanwhile, back in my coffin bed, I was low-key browsing daily reports through the Soul Link. 300 cabins built, 300 guard posts established, everything running smoothly. Suddenly, Pride's link started flickering with a weird, frantic pulse. My lord, Punisher Corps 3rd Patrol just crossed paths with 5 human life forms at the eastern perimeter. Assessment: 4 Tier 1s and 1 Tier 2. Per your standing orders. We monitored them and tried driving them away without throwing hands. However, these humans resorted to straight-up dishonorable tactics. They ambushed and captured Unit 108. I immediately tapped into Unit 108's direct field of view feed, bouncing, shaking, getting hauled over someone's shoulder, tall blur-like trees flying past, heavy chest-pounding breathing from the humans nearby, and 108 himself, his soul fire burning totally chill with zero panic, zero struggle, just chilling right there inside his rope cocoon, patiently waiting. Since his last official order right before getting captured was simply to stand by, he was standing by like an absolute Chad of a soldier. For the very first time since waking up as a skeleton, I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced yet. Rage, like genuine, boiling rage. My patrols had clear instructions, strictly to monitor and shoo out trespassers, not slaughter them. I was being completely reasonable and civil here. I literally gave them every opportunity to just walk away. An ambush was launched in retaliation to snatch one of my people off the grid. You totally broke the rules first, Silver Moon. Rushing headfirst toward Iron Fortress right now. The squad was riding high on ego, convinced they had just secured the ultimate intel flex of the century, clueless to the fact that they were dragging along a pair of live-feed eyes, wired straight into my consciousness every single second. Every movement they made, every word they uttered, every expression they flashed. I was tracking all through a grid of 108 calm, unblinking soul fire beacons. No evidence was being carried by them at all. They were literally hand-delivering an invitation. 3 days march away, I sat straight up from my coffin bed. That was all the prep time I needed. A single ripple of my will pulsed across the entire forest, freezing every skeleton mid-swing, mid-step, mid-everything. 3,000 pairs of hollow eye sockets swiveled instantly toward the valley, and then 3,000 skeletons began their march back home. Blinding rivers of bone converged from every corner, with logging crews, patrol units, and hunting parties, all streaming toward me like tributaries feeding a massive flood. 6 generals materialized beside my throne all at once. My lord, I gazed down at my assembled forces. 3,200 elite skeletons carpeting the valley floor like fresh snow, leaving just 100 rookies behind to house sit the base. I flicked my skeletal hand toward Iron Fortress. We move out. Meanwhile, over at Iron Fortress, Things were spiraling downward into a total dumpster fire for everyone. Silver Moon Squad practically face-planted through the city gates, featuring 5 completely drained adventurers, and a single skeleton trussed up in holy water ropes. Looking like the worst birthday present ever. They split forces immediately. Boar and Ella the mage bolted straight for the Lord's Manor, while Captain Caden dragged Finn and the priestess over to the Adventurers Guild, hauling in their prize trophy. The guild hall went dead silent the second they stepped inside. Every mercenary, every loudmouth braggart, and every brawny musclehead stared in disbelief at the bound skeleton that was still twitching frantically against its restraints. Is that a tier 2 skeleton swordsman? They actually captured one alive? No way, that's impossible. Just wiping out a single one is already a silver rank quest. Bagging one in one piece is low-key a massive flex, no cap. Sweeping all those warnings aside, Caden bolted up the steps and kicked the guild master's door wide open. Gregor was sitting right inside. A peak tier 3 berserker with a heavily scarred face rocking that guild master title. He was casually buffing a warhammer with old-school grandpa energy, like he was cleaning his favorite workshop tool. What's the emergency, Caden? Is the sky falling down? It's way worse than a falling sky, man. Dropping the skeleton straight onto the wooden floorboards, Caden unloaded. An entire undead army was chilling out in Deadbone Forest, featuring at least 50 tier 2 swordsmen acting super organized and disciplined while harvesting bones together. And those 50 were probably just a basic work crew. Rising to his feet, Gregor marched over to inspect the skeleton, stared down hard, and then straight up screamed, "You absolute idiots." He snatched up his heavy warhammer and smashed the skeleton's skull into fine dust. Soulfire snuffed out. "Dead again, Guildmaster. You morons have no clue what you've actually triggered." Gregor was trembling, physically shaking right there. This peak tier 3 warrior, who could probably wrestle grizzly bears, was losing it. An army this coordinated implies an undead lord is pulling the strings from the shadows. High-level undead can track every single soldier's exact coordinates through soul links, and you just dragged one straight into the city. Our entire defensive position is completely compromised. Caden's face drained instantly, turning the exact shade of old milk. An undead lord? Right at that very second. Across town inside the luxurious Lord's Manor, Count Andrew was having a total meltdown of his own. "Are you absolute goblins, you total imbeciles?" He began tossing confidential papers at Boar and Ella like loose confetti. You knew something was seriously wrong, yet you still hauled that cursed thing right here. Do you actually want the entire city to perish with you? Andrew's aristocratic composure had completely vanished. Pure unadulterated hysteria. Grabbing his personal guards, he stormed aggressively toward the guild hall. "Gregor, your people said," before he abruptly stopped mid-sentence, because everyone present in the main hall was witnessing something destined to haunt their deepest nightmares forever. The skeleton, the exact one Gregor had personally demolished, with a shattered skull and extinguished soul fire, vouched as officially dead, suddenly twitched its bony finger. A thin thread of purple light, much finer than a single strand of hair, began flickering deep within its broken eye sockets. Click, click, crack. Unit 108 stood up, its broken skull actively reassembling itself. With its soul fire burning back to life, the skeleton completely fronted on the 2 tier 3 powerhouses standing right beside it. Music. Brushing off their heavy-duty, crushing aura like it was nothing, it lunged straight for Caden's throat. Those bone-white claws flashed forward, swift and deadly like lightning. "Watch out!" Gregor yelled, moving in first. Swinging his warhammer glowing with a blinding white light, he smashed right at the skeleton. Drawing his sword instantly, Andrew jumped right into the fray. Here we had 2 tier 3 fighters, hands down the absolute strongest players in Iron Fortress, both going all out to take down a single tier 2 skeleton. The brawl lasted only a few heartbeats before the skeleton was totally outmatched, getting its limbs shattered into tiny pieces. Yet the real damage was already dealt, not to the body, but a massive psychological blow when its supposedly dead soul fire sparked right back up. "This breaks everything we know," Gregor whispered, Andrew's voice sounding totally dry like sandpaper. "Music. Bigger than just this one skeleton for every undead out there. The soul fire is always the fatal weak point. Take that out and they're just regular bones, with the only exception being a lich, Andrew choked out, nearly losing his voice. That's a tier 5 entity right there. Even the whole empire only has a handful of them. Even so, a lich's phylactery only brings back the lich itself, never handing out free immortality to a basic skeleton grunt. This is totally uncharted territory for us. 3 days. From Deadbone Forest Strait to Iron Fortress in just 3 days. Without wasting another second, Andrew sprinted back toward the manor to trigger the highest emergency alert in the entire history of Iron Fortress, a full evacuation. Every single citizen needed to head east toward Earl Barton's turf right now. Jotting down 8 urgent letters begging Earl Barton for backup, he dispatched them using his absolute fastest messenger hawks. Then calling his wife, he urged, "Take the kids and pack up all my wealth. Get out of here and head to the Earl." Acting like a proper noble lady, his wife grabbed his arm and flat out refused. "I'm not going anywhere without you, Andrew." Dropping every ounce of his usual composed facade in front of his people, the man pulled her into a tight, desperate hug. "I'm the Lord of Iron Fortress. If I run, our family name becomes total trash. You and the kids would end up living in endless shame. I couldn't care less about honor. You're worth way more than the Emperor to me, and I'll die right here by your side. But we've got kids." His voice cracking heavily. "Stop being so stubborn for the children. Just live." Choked up with emotion, she couldn't speak, only sobbing quietly into his chest. Through thick sobs, she kept calling him a total dumbass over and over again. That cry bounced back, reverberating through barren corridors destined to feel even more empty. Warning sirens for the evacuation blared across the entire urban landscape. Hearing those alarms, Hems trudged back to his modest wooden home. Quietly, Lilia was buffing a framed picture, acting as if the madness outside didn't exist at all. "They're coming, yes, they're coming," she muttered without even bothering to turn around. "Get out of here, Lilia. There's still time. I'm not leaving, Hams, even if I end up being the last breathing soul in this town." A smile touched Hams's face, a genuine smile. "What on earth are you grinning about?" She shot him a piercing look. Stepping closer to her, he gently stroked her cheek. "I almost forgot I'm a knight now." "Oh, I never forgot that, Sir Knight," she replied with a soft smile. "Lilia, do you remember the day we first met? That was ages ago. Who could possibly remember? Then just remember this moment right here." With lightning-fast reflexes, his hand moved, delivering a precise chop straight to the back of her neck. Her limbs went instantly limp, but he managed to catch her before she hit the floor. "Please forgive me, Lilia." Carrying her out through the back door, he handed her over to a female adventurer pal, who was waiting outside with a ready horse and cart. He handed her every single coin he had ever managed to save up. "Get her straight to the Imperial capital using the fastest route possible, please." Watching the cart vanish, amidst the tidal wave of fleeing citizens, he finally shut the door. Heading back inside, he pulled a sword out from under his bed, the exact weapon he had once lacked the courage to wield. Taking a whetstone, he sat down by the fireplace and began sharpening the edge with slow, deliberate, rhythmic strokes. One after another, the coward who had run away from my skeleton cavalry was suddenly gearing up for a real fight. Only 3 days away, I was marching forward with 3,200 soldiers, 6 Tier 3 generals, and an army that literally could not be killed. Meanwhile, locked inside a tiny house in a city, on the verge of turning into a war zone, a guy wearing a broken badge was finally growing a backbone. Honestly, I could respect that. If I still possessed an actual heart, I might even feel some sort of emotion. But I'm just a pile of bones, and he's standing right between me and my answers. 3 days later, day 3, we arrived after a grueling 3-day trek. All 3,200 skeletons, sweeping across the countryside like a massive white glacier. There were 0 pit stops and 0 bathroom breaks, and absolutely no whining about sore feet, simply because we don't have any muscles. 0 bladders to worry about, 0 complaints to hear, just skeletal feet grinding into dirt without missing a beat. For 72 hours straight, no cap. Honestly, undead logistics are totally unmatched FR. Peering right through my advanced scout's eyes, Iron Fortress came into view, towering massive against the hazy horizon with heavy stone walls, watchtowers, and battle flags whipping wildly in the wind. It was a legit metropolis, not some dusty starter village and station on those fortifications, where crowds of people, though the streets directly behind them stood dead silent and vacant. Their entire civilian population, was already packing out eastward, forming a long, gloomy exodus of refugees. Whoever called for an evacuation definitely knew what they were doing. Big brain move. Whoever's running this joint actually has a pulse upstairs. It was also pretty obvious upon closer inspection that the defenders weren't exclusively trained troops. Among them stood farmers clutching pitchforks, mothers armed with kitchen blades, and kids looking barely old enough to grow peach fuzz, their knuckles turning stark, white around heavy swords. Right up at the very front line, draped in flashy garments snapping violently in the gale, stood Viscount Andrew himself, the Lord of Iron Fortress and a Tier 3 boss type, the exact clown who orchestrated the wipeout of Deadbone Village and turned Kyle loose on helpless civilians just to manufacture a fake heroic narrative. He was broadcasting a hype speech straight into my scout's auditory feed, which, low-key, isn't ideal since our connection isn't top tier. I managed to catch fragments of it. And credit where credit's due, bro. It was an absolute masterclass of a speech. He didn't sugarcoat anything or sell false hopes of winning, nor did he pretend they had a sliver of survival. Instead, he stepped right up there and straight up told every soul lining those ramparts, "We're dead meat." Then he gave them the harsh reality check of why they needed to bite the dust anyway. We're just human shields, put here to buy precious seconds for the loved ones retreating behind us. Every single minute we hold the line, and every inch further our kids get to safety. That is our only remaining worth. Our forebears shed their blood to lay these very foundations. Every single brick is soaked in their sweat, and every pathway has their bones resting beneath its surface. When those monstrosities finally descend upon us, those soulless, vacant husks that don't even comprehend the concept of mortality, when they show up to strip us of everything, what options do we have left except to fight on these very walls until our lungs give out, and stack our corpses high enough to make the fortress walls even taller? Make them bleed for every single inch of ground they try to snatch from us. Should all our collective lifespans be extended by just one more fleeting minute? If a single child manages to sprint 100 extra steps, that is precisely where our true purpose lies. Splattering his knuckles until they bled, he smashed his fist into the wall with brutal force. Without even flinching, he declared that we aren't fighting for a dumb W here. We're fighting to send a loud message. If you want to breach Iron Fortress, you'll have to climb right over every single one of us standing in your way. Not a single cheer or war cry broke the heavy, oppressive silence. Then a cold blade slid smoothly out of its sheath. Another followed suit right after, and then dozens more joined in. Adjusting his grip tightly on a rusty pitchfork, an old farmer braced himself, brushing stray tears off his trembling face. A teenage guard swiftly drew his sword. Scanning the dense crowd, I suddenly spotted him standing right there. Hams, the exact guy who booked it for my cavalry earlier. He was that total coward who sold out his own village. Yet here he stood with a weapon in hand, refusing to run away this time. Honestly, pretty sus. Pressing his sharp sword hard against his forehead, Andrew closed his eyes tightly and shut them completely, whispering a few hushed words toward the fleeing refugees. I couldn't quite catch what he said before a familiar rhythmic sound started clicking. Click, click, click. Thousands of skeletal feet slammed down onto the earthy ground in flawless synchronization. The dirt beneath them began to violently vibrate. Every single person atop that stone wall went dead silent, straining their ears. Growing steadily louder and denser, the ominous noise echoed, making the heavy stone bricks under their boots start to tremble. Emerging on the distant horizon, a pale white line appeared and rapidly grew wider, thickening by the second, and rushing toward Iron Fortress like an overwhelming tide of bone. Lurking comfortably somewhere right in the middle of that horrifying wave of 3,200 skeletons, 6 Tier 3 generals, and 1 Tier 3 undead lord. They were just chilling there, taking in the whole scene. Through 1,000 pairs of vacant, soulless eye sockets. I'm going to be real with you. That dramatic speech almost hit me right in the feels, almost. Let's not forget Andrew engineered the slaughter of innocent villagers, just to kick off a fake war. He gave Kyle the green light to butcher helpless women and kids for pure political clout, while treating Hams like absolute trash and tossing him a worthless medal. He sneered at him like he was nothing. Now, bleeding from his own busted fist up on that rampart, he's suddenly ready to die for the very folks he couldn't care less about protecting earlier. Talk about a major redemption arc. It's giving way too little, way too late, honestly. Either way, none of this changes the absolute chaos about to unfold. Instead of needing to, I pop my neck bones simply for the cinematic flex. Just to make it look totally dramatic, you know? Alright then, Viscount. Let us see if your defense is hit as hard as your mouth. Reaching the boundary of the flat plane, the pale, white line finally halted. Total silence filled the air as 3,200 skeletons stood dead still, locked in absolute formation, completely motionless and eerily quiet. Their 6,400 empty eye sockets glared straight at Iron Fortress. They were just waiting for a single command, and that was mine, blending right in at the rear of my squad. I stood there looking like any other random skeleton. Nothing about me stood out, while 3,100 killing machines stretched out ahead, looking massive and endless like a wide-open ocean. No speeches were needed, no hype sessions, and definitely no "are you ready" nonsense. With a quick flick of my bony hand raised into the air, that was literally it. One tiny gesture and all hell broke loose. Raising his staff high, Envy, the vice commander and tier 3 mage, channeled his power. At the tip of his staff, a massive sphere of blue soul fire swelled up rapidly, radiating so much insane heat that the surrounding air literally warped. Unleashing it forward, the glowing fireball tore across the morning sky like a blazing comet, before slamming directly into the main gate of Iron Fortress. With a massive boom, wooden splinters and iron shrapnel flew flying in all directions. Rocking violently on its hinges, the entire gate groaned loudly, sounding like it was literally begging for mercy. Up on the wall, Andrew was losing his mind, screaming for catapults to drop rocks and everything else. Drop the rocks, drop everything. Massive boulders came crashing down on my army, heavy and crushing ones. Divine Shield Corps advance, lifting their heavy bone shields overhead. Gluttony's 400 tanks locked in a place, instantly forming an airtight tortoise formation. Heavy boulders slammed onto the shield wall with a deafening boom, 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 smashing a handful of soldiers to pieces with every single hit. It didn't even matter, though. Nearby comrades immediately stepped up to fill the empty gaps, while the crushed skeletons rebuilt themselves right on the ground behind the formation, seamlessly rejoining the shield wall as it healed in real time. Annihilation Corps. Envy gave the command to suppress, turning to the 350 archers, raising their bows in absolute synchronization. They drew back and let loose. A dense cloud of bone arrows completely blanketed the top of the wall. They weren't aiming for kills. The goal was pure chaos. Screams rang out, weapons were dropped, and defenders scrambled frantically for cover. The rock-dropping operation fell apart in a matter of seconds. Window open, Pride. Smash that gate down. Everything for my lord. Pointing his greatsword straight at the crumbling gate, Pride gave the signal, backed by 500 skeleton swordsmen. The Punisher Corps, my absolute sharpest blade, surging forward like a massive, white tidal wave crashing over the barricade. Watching his fortress defenses crumble, Andrew made a split-second call. A totally wild, low-key, reckless choice to ditch the walls entirely. Everyone stationed behind the heavy gate was ordered to prep for a full send charge. His troops stared back at him completely deadpan, thinking he'd straight up lost his mind, charging right into an immortal horde armed with mere farm tools. Yet they obeyed, stumbling down the stone steps in a chaotic rush, lining up behind the gate with raised weapons and trembling hands, as the deafening noise of 500 skeletal blades, slashing relentlessly against the thick wood, echoed from the other side. Suddenly, the gate blew inward, sending a massive shockwave of dust and splinters flying everywhere. Once the thick haze finally settled, the shattered doorway was completely packed with skeletal warriors, wielding blades, flooding through the breach like water rushing past a burst dam. There were no battle cries to be heard, no roaring sounds, just the eerie, rhythmic clicking of bare bones. To defend the Iron Fortress, Andrew led the charge head first, diving straight into the terrifying surge. His soldiers trailed right behind him, screaming and weeping in terror, while swinging every single weapon they had. Honestly, you gotta hand it to the guy. His swordsmanship was genuinely stunning, lightning fast, precise, and effortlessly elegant. He was cutting a path through my undead troops like a graceful ballet dancer, stabbing straight into empty eye sockets and shattering glowing soul fires, dismantling skeletons left and right with chilling efficiency. Yet the whole effort was completely pointless. Every single skeleton he managed to destroy simply reassembled right behind him. Every soul fire he successfully put out reignited just seconds later. It was like he was trying to bail out the ocean using a tiny bucket. As long as the king draws breath, the army stays undefeated. Then Pride made his entrance as the sea of bones suddenly parted to let my one-armed general stroll forward toward Andrew, looking as if he were taking a casual walk through a peaceful garden. The sheer suffocating weight of his aura alone made Andrew's skin prickle with sharp pain. Dripping with blood from numerous cuts, Andrew raised his weapon defiantly, calling out, "Lord of the Iron Fortress, Andrew Conrad Vaughn, state your name." The undead Pride slowly tilted his bare skull sideways, while his soul fire danced with visible contempt. "You don't even deserve to know who I am." Letting out a grim chuckle, Andrew wiped the warm blood from his lips, declaring, "Long before I became a lord, I served as the Empire's Storm Knight, before launching a fierce assault. Blazing fast and highly skilled, his blade whined through the air toward Pride's exposed throat. With a single arm, Pride casually blocked the strike without breaking a sweat. What happened next could technically be called a duel, though in reality, it looked more like a cat toying with a helpless mouse. There was no denying that Andrew's blade work was low-key impressive. Fast, highly adaptable, and expertly targeting vital joints and weak spots. He fought like a true professional, but Pride was simply vibing and playing along, matching every single strike blow for blow using only one arm, big time. Relentless, bone-crushing blows rained down, leaving Andrew pinned on the defensive while Wrath's riders blew right past the open gates behind them. Blown right past the open gates behind them. 400 skeletal horsemen came thundering down the ancient cobblestones, making the earth tremble as ghostly blue sparks flew from their hooves. It looked like an absolute whiteout avalanche tearing straight through the city. Yet Hamza stood his ground right dead in their path. Locking eyes with the vanguard, he recognized that exact same skeletal rider that had hunted him through the woods, possessing a haunting gaze he could never shake off. His knees began to go completely weak, his teeth clattering together as ice-cold dread flooded his chest. Still, turning tail wasn't an option. "I already bailed on my home once," he whispered, his voice barely carrying. "There's no way I'm running this time," he roared, charging forward. A lone guy sprinting head-on at 400 cavalry. Pure, unfiltered insanity mixed with mad bravery. The charging skeleton thought as he closed the distance. What is this tiny loser even rambling about? Without dropping his speed, he leveled his lance. The sharp tip punched straight through Hamza's left shoulder, hoisting him clean off the pavement, skewered and dangling helplessly from the weapon. His body dragged along the dirt as the mount kept barreling forward. Even then, Hamza kept a death grip on his sword. Gathering his last ounce of energy, he slashed blindly at the rider's helmet. Clang! A dead-on hit that violently whipped the skeleton's head sideways. Hamza saw it land, realizing he'd actually made contact. A bloody grin broke across his face. "How you like that, you bonehead? Remember the name Hamza? Honorary knight." He was violently thrown off the lance, spinning wildly through the air before smashing into the ground. The very last image burned into his mind before his eyes fluttered shut. Was Lily's smile? Okay, man, that part honestly got to me. Even my soul fire felt that sting. Moving on. Back at the duel, Pride was officially losing interest. With a flick of his blade, he cleanly sliced Andrew's entire left arm off at the shoulder. Blood sprayed everywhere, causing Andrew to stumble hard without going down, propping himself up with his sword like a crutch. He had known the score the entire time. Pride was just messing with him. Countless opportunities to land a lethal strike had all been deliberately bypassed because public humiliation was the whole point. Still, Andrew couldn't care less. His single mission was buying time, and every single second of this grueling duel meant another precious moment for the refugees fleeing east. Dignity? Who cares about Pride when a kid's life is on the line? Pride's soul fire flickered impatiently. Is this pathetic show finally over? Because my lord's patience has totally run out. Farewell, little bug, as Pride's energy completely shifted. Both speed and power spiked to a whole new tier, giving Andrew barely enough time to catch a glimpse of the blade before agony tore through his chest. Blasted backward into his own vanguard, he scattered his troops like bowling pins. The The Lord has fallen. We can't kill them. My leg, someone give me a hand. As morale shattered into dust, the soldiers suddenly realized with pure dread that the enemy forces weren't dwindling at all, but actually multiplying. Their own fallen comrades began twitching on the blood-soaked earth, hauling themselves back up with eerie soul fire blazing in their eyes to join my ranks, since every human fatality only made me stronger. And every defender who dropped instantly became another fresh attacker. Face down in a growing puddle of his own crimson blood lay Andrew, coughing up thick red, while watching his beloved city burn, refusing to give up just yet. He shoved his cracked sword deep into the cobblestone pavement and dragged his broken body upright. Swaying, bleeding out, with one arm completely dead, he let out a savage roar. Soldiers, charge! Cutting straight through the chaos like a lightning bolt, that voice reminded every single survivor of a speech on the wall and why they chose to stay, and what they were fighting for. Screw it, they were dead meat anyway. The remaining defenders went completely feral, tossing aside their shields and charging straight into my legion barehanded, biting, clawing, and smashing enemy bone with their bloody, battered fists. They weren't fighting to win anymore, they were fighting just to buy time. As Pride hoisted his blade over Andrew for the final execution, Andrew glanced up at him, showing zero fear and zero anger, actually wearing a quiet smile, looking past Pride toward his people, those suicidal, magnificent, doomed souls who were still locked in battle. He mustered the strength to shout one last time, "Charge!" Down came the bone sword, splitting Andrew's frame open as he collapsed for good. By nightfall, the Iron Fortress had become a ghost town, every alley choked with pale, white bone, leaving not a single breathing soul left behind those walls. The legacy of a man's 20-year grind, where dirt trails had evolved into paved stone, and rough shacks had transformed into sturdy buildings, scaling from a tiny handful up to tens of thousands. Wiped out in a single afternoon. Back at camp that evening, I sat quietly on my throne, reviewing the entire sequence through the Soul Link feeds, taking in the clashes, the speeches, the desperate charges, and the final breaths. Andrew turned out to be a hell of a complex guy. It was by his direct command that the slaughter dragging me down to this place happened. Bogus conflicts were totally engineered by him purely for political clout. Common folks were treated like absolute garbage while he looked down his nose at everyone. Right after that, up on his high rampart he stood, swearing to his followers he bled and fought completely for them with total honesty, throwing punches for their cause, and screaming his lungs out for them to keep swinging until his last breath. Mankind makes zero sense whatsoever. Against the dusty armrest, my bony fingertips tapped out a rhythmic click, 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 because Iron Fortress is officially locked down by yours truly now. Scattered refugees are fleeing hard toward the east. Word of this whole mess will reach Earl Barton in no time. Our undead empire just successfully secured its very first urban territory. Meanwhile, somewhere along a dusty lane, winding straight toward the imperial capital, Lilia lies completely knocked out inside a jolting cart, completely clueless that the exact guy who put her to sleep just bit the dust, cackling hysterically with a skeleton's spear skewering straight through his shoulder. A beating heart is something I totally lack, and tear ducts are completely missing from my skull, leaving me with zero biological wiring for actual grief. Still, if that weren't the case, nah, I'm just a bag of bones and we don't do all those heavy feels. Back to the grind, since I've got an entire metropolis waiting for a major glow-up, strolling down the desolate avenues of Iron Fortress. Post-battle felt eerie, given how absolutely nobody was home. A dozen different post-conquest scenarios had totally played out in my head beforehand. Brutal street skirmishes against stubborn holdouts, terrified civilians begging hysterically for mercy, or stuck-up nobles surrendering dramatically while clutching their fancy hats. Maybe even a cinematic final stand echoing inside the Grand Throne Room. But nope. Zilch, featuring empty streets, vacant houses, and a whole lot of nothingness everywhere. The entire local populace had completely cleared out, leaving behind not even a single stray rat, just smeared bloodstains, wrecked furniture, and that unmistakable, faint vibe we ghosted this place in a massive rush. Am I honestly that terrifying? Standing dead center in an utterly deserted public plaza, I felt genuinely clueless and baffled. Executing a massacre on anyone wasn't even on my to-do list. Giving the peaceful diplomatic approach a legitimate shot was the plan. envisioning an undead human community sharing a unified destiny, running a pilot program on peaceful coexistence and vibrant cultural exchange. Basically peak skeleton diplomacy, but whatever. An empty city basically translates to free real estate anyway. With a flick of my hand, I signal Greed, who immediately deployed his squad into high gear, taking inventory of supplies, mapping out building layouts, and evaluating structural wall damage. His insane level of efficiency was honestly kind of scary. That specific ghoul was totally born to be a hardcore bureaucrat. Now here comes the absolute plot twist with a real payout drops. As the final flicker of resistance flatlined, a massive shockwave of death energy surged violently from every single nook of Iron Fortress, where 3,000 fallen defenders, soldiers, and everyday citizens had breathed their last, releasing souls that radiated the purest essence I had ever witnessed, only to blend seamlessly with the residual soul fires of my very own troops, who had been shattered and stitched back together mid-battle. The outcome? A crazy evolution storm tore straight through my entire army, boosting my 3,000 soldiers as they absorbed Iron Fortress's energy, until their ranks ballooned past the 4,000 mark. The dead defenders' bones officially beefed up my squad, while the quality leap was honestly straight up wild. Every single combat unit, leaving aside just 300 logistic skeletons, leveled up to Tier 3, meaning my most basic. Grunt Soldier could now totally throw hands with a top tier Human Knight. Total cannon fodder turned into elite main generals. Oh man, starting with Pride, the Tier 4 Bone Berserker, followed by Wrath, the Tier 4 Bone Knight, and Gluttony, the Tier 4 Bone Colossus. Envy stepped up as the Tier 4 Bone Archer, and Greed evolved into a Tier 4 Vampire who literally grew actual skin and fangs, giving our resident accountant a massive glow-up. Lust became a Tier 4 Grand Skeleton Mage, and even Lust's Vice Commander unlocked full-blown mage status. Plus, her entire crew of 400 soldiers transformed into Tier 3 Skeleton Mages, giving me a brand new 400-strong magic division, whose sheer firepower just went nuclear. That was when my memory flashed to someone special from Unit 108. The skeleton swordsman who had been kidnapped by the Silver Moon Squad survived taking a skull-smashing blow from Tier 3 Guildmaster, got resurrected right inside the enemy's main base, and hacked and slashed his way through a room packed with adventurers. An employee pulling moves like that totally earned a promotion, so I cashed in my save naming slot. From this moment on, I dub you Sloth. Sloth energy instantly detonated deep inside his tiny skeletal frame, causing his bones to shatter and reconstruct at lightning-fast speed. Once the blinding light faded, standing tall before my generals was a brand new Tier 4 Bone Assassin, designated as the new general of the Shadow Guard, to handle intelligence, reconnaissance, and personal protection. 7 generals total, the 7 deadly sins collection was finally complete. And then, all that accumulated energy, pouring from 7 Tier 4 generals and 4,000 subordinates, rushed backward through the soul link, slamming straight into me until I finally broke through into a Tier 4 undead sovereign, unlocking the brand new ability, Immortal. Once my soul fire burns out completely, a full power revival happens right on the spot instantly. A 24-hour cooldown leads to an immediate comeback at maximum stats. Basically literal guardian angel armo, no cap. A totally free extra life, like hitting continue on an arcade screen. Yet science demanded a test, so everybody back up right now. Shuffling backward in absolute confusion, my entire army obeyed, leaving me standing completely alone dead in the center plaza, drawing in a phantom breath I couldn't technically take. I off myself. Boom, my soul fire simply vanished, collapsing all my bones into a quiet pile on the pavement. Dead, and just like that, the soul network went dark. All 4,000 of my loyal soldiers, along with 7 elite generals, felt the severing at once. Flickering, dimming, and nearly dying, their soul fires went completely wild. For 1,000 skeletons found themselves experiencing a massive existential crisis at the exact same second. Pure, blind panic took over for a single heartbeat, before my scattered bones snapped right back together at 100 times their fall speed, standing tall, completely whole once more, with soul fire burning deeper and brighter than ever before. Peak condition confirmed, which is honestly wild. Checking the immortal skill cooldown timer next. It ought to read 23 hours and 59 minutes left. Instead it said ready, making me blink my non-existent eyes. The skill description explicitly promised a peak condition revival. And apparently, peak condition means refreshing every single ability back to maximum, which apparently includes the cooldown of Immortal itself. Since the resurrection resets its very own cooldown, I can kick the bucket and come back infinitely. There is no cooldown because using it automatically refreshes it. It's a bug, a total glitch, an endless loop of pure immortality. I'm low-key unkillable right now. It took everything in my power to stop myself from cackling like an over-the-top cartoon villain, right in front of my own army. Stay dignified. Hold on to that majestic sovereign aura. Skip the victory dance since you're literally a walking skeleton. And act like you've been here before. My generals were already dropping to their knees, with soul fires blazing fiercely from absolute religious fervor. Their master had just died and risen right before their eyes, making them convinced they were witnessing the genuine, unfiltered power of an actual god. I mean, they weren't entirely wrong, but here is the catch. Being literally invincible doesn't mean I need to go full-on world destruction mode. I'm not some mindless, basic undead grunt, whose sole purpose is slaughter and devouring. An endless lifetime belongs to me. Should I turn this whole realm into a barren wasteland? Then, what? Lounging on a mountain of bones for all eternity. Playing tic-tac-toe with greed for 10,000 years sounds like a total snooze fest. Just watching dust slowly pile up over empty ruins forever. That honestly feels like the most boring afterlife you could ever imagine. And I'm already stuck living my afterlife. Nah, what I'm really chasing is a garden, a living, breathing, thriving world packed with fascinating civilizations, bizarre cultures, and some genuinely entertaining chaos. A world where things actually pop off, giving me the chance to kick back on my throne with my legs crossed, tap my finger bones against the armrest, and just vibe while watching the show. A god with nothing to do is a totally miserable god. Total world destruction isn't even necessary for the undead empire. It just needs to make dead sure the world knows who's actually running things. My eyes swept over my army. For 1,000 tier, 3 soldiers standing at the ready. 74 generals, a single city, and 1 completely unkillable sovereign. While somewhere off to the east, an entire empire was about to get schooled on my name. Though first, and this was honestly the most critical question, I had to figure out what the heck to do with all these vacant houses. Greed, get to work converting the entire residential district right now. Hot springs are a must, and don't even bother asking me how. Just make it happen, my lord. Skeletons aren't built to feel temperature. Trust me, I'm well aware. It's all about the vibe, Greed. It's totally about the aesthetic. Somewhere along a dusty road pushing east, a completely separate story was quietly unfolding in the shadows. A bumpy carriage clattered loudly down a packed dirt path, flanked by thousands of desperate refugees, scrambling away from my brand new property. Resting inside was 14-year-old Reinhard Andreas von Andwesson. Seated directly across from him was his mother, Lino Margarita von, a high-society noblewoman, who looked as if she were simply rolling up to an afternoon tea party, rather than fleeing the total annihilation of everything she had ever built. Her posture was flawless, her hands neatly folded, and her face completely composed, except for her eyes, which were hollow and stained red, staring blankly right through the glass window. Hal the butler, that creepy shadow-walking ghost of a man, reached his arm back from the driver's seat without even turning his head, and handed her a sealed letter. The master left strict instructions for me to deliver this right after departure. Her fingertips barely brushed the envelope, pulling back on instinct. Before she finally grabbed it, the loud, cracking snap of the wax seal broke the heavy silence inside that carriage. Andrew's handwriting exhibits a minor, hurried scrawl, displaying the bold strokes of a city builder. Rather than calligraphy, my dear Lino, I vividly recall our very first day arriving at Iron Fortress, when you stepped out rocking your finest silk dress, straight into a thick patch of muck, deep enough to swallow your designer kicks whole. That unmistakable expression of sheer disgust on your face. Man, I was totally betting you'd turn around and catch the next carriage straight back to the capital. Instead, you just frowned, hiked up your skirt, and pressed on beside me. Back then, I was an absolute nobody. Just a broke kid armed with a fancy title and big dreams. I honestly couldn't wrap my head around why high society royalty like you would stoop so low as to personally, tutoring uncultured villagers on proper bowing etiquette, table manners, and how to stand tall with good posture. For 2 decades, you constantly bitched about the biting local wind, swearing it would ruin your complexion, and claiming the food was way too rough for your stomach. Yet deep down, I know the truth. You low-key love this place even more than I did. Look at me rambling on about the good old days again. Probably just getting soft in my old age. The real point is, make sure you eat your breakfast, or that chronic ulcer of yours is going to act up again. Actually sit down for a proper lunch too, since you'll need all the energy you can get to keep schooling. That little menace Reinhardt who constantly drives you nuts. Try not to stuff yourself at dinner, knowing full well you can't sleep when your stomach's overloaded. Pull the damn blanket over yourself when you sleep at night, and stop kicking it off like a stubborn toddler. There are so many things I always figured I'd have endless time to say, though I never quite voiced them right. I love you, and I deeply regret not repeating it more often, even though those 3 simple words formed the foundation behind every single move I ever made. Lastly, please forgive me, move forward, and live your own life to the fullest. Find yourself someone who can actually keep you cozy by a fireplace. Someone who appreciates your grace far better than I ever managed. Someone who truly deserves you. Ender Conrad von Nama. The parchment slipped from her trembling fingertips and fluttered silently down onto the plush velvet carpet. Right then, the woman who had never, throughout her son's entire memory, ever displayed a single crack in her iron facade. That same matriarch who routinely chewed him out over a crooked collar and winced at the faintest clink of silverware, slapped both hands over her mouth, and completely broke down. Her shoulders trembled violently, scorching tears streaming past her fingers and dripping onto her designer dress, to leave dark, bleeding stains as every single memory hit her all at once, low-key overwhelming her. The pale moonlight flashed back to the night they met, his face turning bright red, back when he awkwardly fumbled while pinning a wildflower into her hair. 3 sleepless nights spent grinding. Over Iron Fortress's original city layout flashed before her, along with those bloodshot eyes looking up at her gratefully when she brought him hot soup. The gentle way he cradled infant Reinhardt as if the baby was fragile spun glass, while grinning like an absolute total noob who completely forgot how to speak. She had honestly believed goodbye was something that only happened to other people. Reinhardt froze dead in his tracks, having never witnessed his mother break down in tears, not even once. Not ever. His initial instinct was to recoil and shrink back into the dark corner, until a distant memory from years ago resurfaced, when he hid away in the garden, crying his eyes out because he failed to memorize their intricate family history and his mother had chewed him out for it. Back then, his father found him hiding, and Reinhardt had braced himself for another lecture. Instead, Andrew just gave his head a warm pat and gestured toward the open sky. Reinhardt, whenever you're terrified, if you choose to just hide away, your whole world shrinks down, until there's nothing left standing except that pure fear. Staring right back at you, look up at the endless stars, the massive mountains, and the solid earth beneath our feet. Realize they are all infinitely bigger than your panic. Once you lock all of that grand beauty inside your heart, that fear loses all its power. The boy stared at his mother, shattered, crying, utterly alone, and suddenly grasped that father was gone forever. And he was her entire world now, inching closer with slow, hesitant movements. He wrapped his thin, still developing arms around her frame, keeping completely silent without a single word, and gently, clumsily patted her back, in the exact way he remembered his father doing it. Lena stiffened up rigidly for a brief second, before completely collapsing into her young son's embrace, as the emotional dam burst wide open in a quiet, heartbreaking flood of deep, wrenching sobs pouring out from a resilient woman who had kept everything tightly glued together for 20 years. Up front on the driver's bench, Hal's weathered shoulders gave a single, distinct shudder, while a solitary, murky tear traced a slow path down the deep wrinkles of his aged face, only to be instantly whipped away by the biting wind before it could ever hit the ground. Pulling hard on the reins, he cracked the whip sharply as the heavy carriage lurched forward through the dense sea of displaced refugees, and through the narrow opening of the back curtain. Reinhardt cast one final, lingering look backward. Far off on the dim horizon, the massive ramparts of Iron Fortress dwindled into nothingness. In his mind's eye, he could vividly picture his old man, standing completely solo against the oncoming white tide before abruptly pivoting away, glancing downward at his weeping mother cradled securely in his arms. He locked his grip and squeezed his fist tight. Family honor and the ultimate survival of Iron Fortress. Concepts that used to be total gibberish to a 14-year-old kid suddenly became his entire world. Look, I'm literally a skeleton here, meaning I got 0 tear ducts. A beating heart is out of the question. Neither do I possess whatever mystical gland is responsible for generating thoughts like, dang, maybe I shouldn't have pulled that stunt. Even so, deep down inside my Tier 4 soul fire, a weird little spark flickered to life. Once I ran the diagnostic through my system network later on, the facts were clear. Andrew was my sworn enemy who engineered the very conflict that dragged me straight to his doorstep. He was the mastermind behind slaughtered villagers, torched homesteads, and fabricated evidence. Yet that specific letter wasn't penned by some heartless politician or a ruthless war criminal. Nah, that message was drafted by a grieving husband who knew for a fact he'd never lay eyes on his wife again. And right now, a 14-year-old kid is forced to grow up way too fast, strictly because of my actions. Resting comfortably on my upgraded Lord's Manor throne, I rhythmically tapped my finger bones. And let me tell you, this plush setup is a massive glow-up from a damp tree stump. Click, click, I permanently saved that name to my memory banks. Reinhard Andreas Vaughn, having a strong hunch that our paths would cross again. Back at the valley base, my grand agricultural experiment was smoothly cruising into its 5th consecutive day of epic failure. Leaning heavily on his wooden walking stick, the elderly village chief stood observing my incompetent farming crew with the endurance of a saint and the deadpan vibe of a guy who had completely checked out on reality. A desperate villager was literally begging a skeleton, stretched out inside an open planting trench, pleading, "Master Skeleton, please get up, the seeds go down in the hole. The wheat grains go in the dirt." Not you. My undead grunt was completely sprawled out flat on his back, arms crossed tight across his bony ribcage while aggressively shifting his pelvis to dial in that supreme, dirt-hugging angle for maximum comfort and zero shame. A guy named Buck leaned over and whispered to the chief, "It's been 5 whole days, and these boneheads still refuse to learn. Just yesterday, another squad went ahead and planted an entire crate of farming hose right into the soil, literally burying the iron tools in straight little rows, before watering them religiously every single day, while expecting baby garden tools to sprout." Giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder, the chief replied, "Hey, stay patient. At least they're putting in work. And honestly, nobody's tried to murder us yet." Fair point. Every boss's ultimate dream and worst nightmare combined were embodied by my skeleton farm crew. Unlimited energy, zero pay, and total compliance defined them. Yet their intellect matched a turnip, frankly, even lower than a turnip, since a turnip at least recognizes it belongs in the dirt. Meanwhile, within what Royd and Rosen had started dubbing the Eternal Night Royal Academy, my 2 human professors were having a deep, philosophical chat, while teaching class, low-key, contemplating their life choices. "Do you think we can still bust out of here?" Royd asked, grinding charcoal down without glancing up. Rosen froze mid-stroke over the map he was currently drafting, leaving an accidental streak of black ink right across the Audrey Empire. "Escape to where? Back to the Iron Fortress, where Andrew's bones are probably being burned as firewood, or the Imperial capital. You saw what those things can do? They're literally invincible. We can hide inside the Emperor's restroom, and they'd still track us down. And at that point, we wouldn't even be teachers anymore. We'd literally just be fertilizer," Royd muttered, slumping against the stone wall. "Yeah, besides," as Rosen picked his charcoal back up, "this gig isn't even that bad. We teach a few classes and get free room and board, plus 0 risk of getting sent to die on some random battlefield." Then he dropped a statement that completely shocked both of them. "Don't you think the skeletons are actually kind of low-key adorable?" Royd's brain straight up short-circuited. "Are you dead-ass serious? They're just so simple-minded. Yesterday, I taught one how to write and casually told it, 'You're the Lord's most competent soldier, man.' You know what went down next? It literally walked around with its chest puffed out proudly the entire day. Every single bone in its body was clicking and clacking loudly, because it was standing so stiff and straight, acting like it desperately wanted every other skeleton to know it had just been validated. Roy, picture the whole scene. A skeleton strutting across a construction site in broad daylight, rattling with sheer pride because a human gave a compliment. He burst out laughing, way better than dealing with stuck-up nobles anyway. Honestly, now shut up and help me finish these lesson plans, bro. If the Lord comes back and catches us goofing off, we're gonna get replanted in the re-education zone right next to the turnip skulls. Haha, they were cracking up, genuinely laughing out loud, right in the heart of a terrifying undead empire, surrounded by skeletons serving an almighty bone lord, who could unmake them from existence with just a single passing thought. Yet somehow they were totally at peace with it. Classic Stockholm Syndrome. Perhaps, or maybe being a skeleton is just vibe. Being a teacher low-key hits different than playing a noble. Serve it now back to me. Perched right on the summit of the tallest iron fortress tower surveying my newly claimed ghost town. Gus are casually tossing loose papers across empty alleys. I am flexing total ownership over a city with 0 souls. Truly the world's loneliest real estate flexing session. Greed, my Secretary of State, materialized right behind me completely soundlessly. Those vampire stealth buffs were honestly cracked. An inventory report on parchment was handed over by him. My lord, the complete asset catalog is ready. 0 food, cloth, or weaponry remained stockpiled. Portable items were unfortunately looted by fleeing humans. However, the real MVP strategic asset stays outside town limits. The mountain behind a fortress was pointed at by him. Scars from heavy mining cover this place, called Iron Fortress, simply because it sits directly upon an endless iron. Orevin. High-grade iron, or makes up almost the entirety of that mountain. Only the surface was barely scratched by the previous lord. A sudden flare ignited deep inside my soul fire. An entire mountain loaded with iron weapons, armor, heavy tools, and raw construction materials. The absolute blueprint for an industrial empire was just sitting right there, waiting on someone possessing an infinite and tireless workforce to farm it, which happens to be my exact specialty. Then reality hit me with a major logistical headache. My main base sits far away in the valley, separated by hundreds of miles of untamed wilderness, shipping tons of heavy iron through dense forests by making skeletons lug boulders on their skulls for 3 days straight is a total L. Then, pulled straight from the archive of my past life memories, dropped the ultimate cheat code of Chinese civilization wisdom. If you want to get rich, build roads first. The solution was so insanely clean it was art. All units, except for the arcane core, stay behind at Iron Fortress to assist the Secretary of State with cleanup and remodeling. The arcane core rolls with me. 400 tier, 3 skeleton mages lined up behind Lust, and her vice commander. Basically, my personal magical construction squad. We rolled out of Iron Fortress, setting our sights toward the valley base with a massive quest. Carve a highway through hundreds of miles of brutal wilderness, wide enough for heavy supply wagons and arrow straight, to fuse my 2 territories into one unstoppable empire. Why go with a mage core, you ask? Because 400 earth-shaping skeletons can easily blast through solid rock and magically level entire terrains, making them basically a medieval corps of engineers, outfitted with absolute nuclear firepower, following the golden rule to get rich by building roads first. I was about to unlock an endless magical labor force. The infrastructure era of the undead empire is officially rolling. And somewhere deep inside my valley, a skeleton is still casually lying in a planting hole, peacefully communing with the dirt beneath him, while his co-workers lazily water a row of buried hoses. We will get there eventually, though. About half an hour later, I found myself standing right outside the northern gate of Iron Fortress, with 400 tier, 3 skeleton mages standing in flawless formation behind me, and 2 tier, 4 commanders leading the charge. This kind of absurd, magical firepower could easily make kingdoms tremble, though today it was simply going to lay down asphalt. I pointed my finger toward the overgrown, bumpy wilderness stretching straight toward my valley base, and dropped the command, target home base. Build me a massive 30-meter wide superhighway big, enough for Wrath's entire cavalry to ride side by side. Stepping forward, the vice commander raised his staff high and began barking out orders across the Soul network with the absolute hype of a hardcore construction foreman who had been waiting his entire undead existence for this exact moment. Arcane Engineering Battalion. Commence Operation Genesis. First Squadron Clearing Team. Ready. 100 skeleton mages stepped forward in unison. Staffs raised. No chanting, no dramatic incantations needed. As the sole network. Let them completely skip all that theatrical nonsense and go straight to pure devastation. Grand Fireball coordinates locked. Carpet bombardment across 3 volleys fire. 100 glowing blue fireballs screamed up into the sky in tight formation, bent smoothly through the air, and rained absolute destruction down on the landscape ahead. Boom, 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 boom. The successive blasts chained together seamlessly into one continuous wall of annihilation. Trees instantly turned to charcoal. Heavy boulders shattered into gravel, and some random monster hiding out in the tall grass didn't even get a second to scream before turning straight into ash. Just 3 volleys later, the frontline terrain had transformed into a completely scorched wasteland, wiped totally clean with 0 obstacles left standing. Only endless blackened earth stretched across hundreds of meters. Second Squadron, terrain shaping is ready. Stepping forward right on cue, another 100 mages unleashed earth manipulation, raising, compressing, and molding ground. As 100 staffs struck the earth simultaneously, the ground itself sprang to life. That scorched dirt began churning and rolling aggressively, shifting fluidly as if giant invisible hands were kneading dough. Craters vanished into nothing while jagged hills were flattened. Loose soil was crammed down to maximum density, and all excess rocks were squeezed straight to the margins, automatically locking into neat roadside barriers. Within mere minutes, a 30-meter wide, breathtakingly level highway materialized out of thin air. Third Squadron. Surface hardening ready, shouted the third wave as they moved in, executing rock solidification via continuous cast. A brilliant gray-white light swept across the fresh dirt road like a tidal wave, and everywhere that energy touched, soft earth instantly solidified into flat, smooth, impenetrable stone. Stepping onto the fresh pavement, I gave it a heavy stomp. Rock hard. You could easily park a heavy tank on this. Not bad at all for just 10 minutes. Transforming raw wilderness into a finished highway, stretching out hundreds of meters of pristine road. You flatter us, my lord, the vice commander said with genuine humility. This is merely standard procedure here. Backed by your will, we can push even faster, much faster. Oh man, I totally vibe with this guy. All units, shift to assembly line mode. 3 groups cycling continuously with 0 downtime. Then it happened. Arguably the most aesthetic, mind-blowing spectacle I had ever witnessed. Group 1's fireballs were still midair, when Group 2 immediately started shaping the earth directly behind the blast zone, while Group 3 wrapped up, hardening the previous section, just as Group 1 finished recharging to launch the next volley. 300 mages operated like 3 flawlessly synchronized gears, maintaining an endless loop of destruction, reshaping, and solidification. A wide, flat, dark gray highway surged across the landscape at a terrifying pace, gobbling up the wild terrain like an absolutely famished snake. Kilometers of finished road rolled out every single hour, making my inner soul fire grin so wide it nearly split apart. This right here is the true value of high-tier units. Forget combat, just give me pure infrastructure. I'd honestly tear up right now if I actually had tiered ducks, which I don't. Just then, Lust quietly glided up right beside me. My lord, even though this pavement is seriously rugged, it's low-key, too obvious and bound to draw unwanted. Heat shining like a flare in the pitch dark, attracting monsters and worse. Human smart girl, a pristine highway, randomly popping out of nowhere right smack in the deep wilderness. That's pretty much a massive neon billboard flashing. Undead Empire right this way, good point. The grand finale is all yours. Stepping up to the center of the road, Lust gave a slight bow, with her arms thrown wide open. A chaotic burst of death energy and dark magic surged from her frame, spawning thousands of complex, glowing runes that quickly vanished deep into the asphalt. Death illusion barrier the highway gave a single heavy shudder, and while nothing physically shifted on the surface, my connection through the soul network let me see. Her handiwork, an invisible veil of illusion magic, was now completely blanketing the entire stretch of road. To anybody outside my ranks, this highway simply ceased to exist. What outsiders would witness instead was a toxic wasteland, choked with noxious fog and scattered bleached bones. Any trespasser beneath tier 4 foolish enough to wander through would instantly get trapped in endless looping hallucinations of phantom route, completely hidden from everyone but us brilliant move lust. That was an absolute W. Then I rested a hand on my chin as a fresh hustle started brewing, though keeping it totally off the grid. Feels like sleeping on some serious passive income potential. My internal soul fire began pulsing with pure entrepreneurial hustle. New order pulled 200 tier 3 poison archers straight out of the Annihilation Core, along with 100 tier 3 skeleton knights summoned from the Fearless Charge Core. Organize them into 3-man squads consisting of 2 archers and 1 knight and station. A single squad at every 2-kilometer mark down the highway. Tilting her skull in sheer confusion, Lust asked my lord what's the play. My soul fire was basically vibing and doing a happy dance. Toll booze, we literally poured our blood, sweat, and magic into paving this road. Why on earth should anyone roll down it for free? Starting right now, any traveling merchant caravan mercenary crew or wandering adventurer party crossing this asphalt is going to pay a toll. We'll have fixed rates bulk discounts for regular clients and maybe even a VIP loyalty rewards program later down the line. And should anybody try dodging the fee or acting up, my tone dropping into an icy chill, the highway patrol is going to have a very convincing chat with them. As sudden clarity washed over her lust's soul fire flickered, I see. You plan on monopolizing the entire economic lifeline of the Iron Fortress territory using just this single road. My lord's tactical genius leaves me completely mind-blown every single time. I am totally shook. Oh, please, it's really nothing crazy at all. Just standard operating procedure, fam. While my bony hand waves dismissively in the air, my brain is low-key crunching those future bag numbers. Infrastructure plus logistics plus toll collection equals pure passive income. Baby, the undead empire has officially just entered the transportation business. A ghost highway that only our crew can spot is finally live, complete with skeleton toll booth operators who are literally immune to any bribes because they don't eat or spend cash anyway, plus a squad of 400 mage builders, laying down fresh pavement way faster than most nations can even build a single bridge. Eat your heart out, Roman Empire. Your roads took decades to finish while mine take mere hours. And on top of that, they're totally invisible, meanwhile. Away in some remote corner of the world I knew nothing about, a brand new story was starting to unfold. Snapping awake inside a bumpy, jolting carriage, Lilia clutched her throbbing head, haunted by one very crystal-clear memory. Her boyfriend had just karate chopped her right into next week. Bolting upright and peering out the window, she saw no iron fortress. No familiar walls, just barren wasteland flashing past her eyes. The cart was being steered by a total stranger, with short hair, an athletic build, and rugged leather armor. Did Hams really pull this off? Without glancing back, the woman grunted, "Yep. Gotta hand it to him. I never figured that coward had it in him. Guess I totally misread the guy." Her name was Kayla, a black iron rank adventurer hired by Tier 1 Hams to escort Lilia all the way to the Imperial capital, with his entire life savings handed over as payment. 100 gold coins. Let that sink in. 100 gold coins. That amount is generational wealth for any ordinary family. Every single coin that former village boy had ever managed to earn, scrape together and squirrel away, every last bit of it, was dumped right into an adventurer's palms with one strict order. Get her safely to the capital, by the fastest route possible, though Kayla, to her credit, had standards. He offered me 50, but this gig honestly isn't worth 50 gold. I'll take 2 for my trouble. And the rest is yours. Lilia didn't even bother arguing. She desperately needed that cash to stay alive and eventually make her grand comeback. Can you teach me how to fight, though? Kayla's grip suddenly froze dead on the reins. You want to, a woman who has never even held a sword? Forget about it. Combat isn't some game. People actually die out here. You're a woman too? Yeah, but I'm built different. Having 0 other options is the exact reason I ended up trapped on this crazy path. Take the cash, head straight to the capital, and look, you've totally got choices here. Just settle down with some decent person and drop this whole mess. Teach me. Lilia's voice barely cut through the air, even though a spine of pure iron hid underneath her tone. Please, followed by a heavy silence, broken only by wagon wheels grinding over dirt. Fine, but I'm just a low-tier black iron rank. Level 1 here, so I can't teach you any flashy moves. That's more than enough for me. I'm paying you. Keep your cash because you're going to need it later on. A tiny fraction of warmth snuck into Kayla's voice. Consider it my final annoying favor. That Ham's forced me to handle. Only in exchange, though. You gotta spill all his most embarrassing secrets to me. Honestly, I've always wondered how a total weirdo like that managed to stay alive this long. A blazing fire ignited in Lilia's eyes, as she whispered so softly that only the passing breeze caught it. I will never forget this kindness. Pitch-black darkness settled as they made camp in a forest clearing that night. Kayla tossed her some dry rations, telling her to eat up, since she'd need the energy. Lilia didn't touch the food. When do we start training? Kayla shot her a surprised look, pausing mid-bite of rock-hard black bread. Damn, you're really that eager? I've got zero time to waste. Kayla stared deep into Lilia's eyes, spotting something right away that she recognized instantly. Not sadness, not grief, but pure, unadulterated hatred. All right then. Pulling a heavy wooden stick from the cart, Kayla chucked it right at Lilia, about a meter long, and way heavier than it looked. Lesson 1 isn't about how to kill. It's about how to stand. She aggressively kicked Lilia's feet apart, to shoulder width, bending her knees down low with her center of gravity dropped way down. Just like this. Stumbling slightly, Lilia forced herself into position. Now, lift that stick and point it straight at me. Lilia immediately obeyed. Way too high. Keep those elbows unlocked and chill out. You're aiming for my throat, not shooting for the moon. Just holding this basic stance made Lilia's arms feel like they were on fire, while her legs began shaking violently within minutes. Hold that pose. Kayla turned and walked away to unroll her sleeping blanket. Until when? Until you literally drop. Time dragged on forever, with thick sweat streaming down Lilia's face and stinging her eyes. Her arms screaming in agony and her thigh muscles seizing up in cramps. That simple stick felt like it weighed a literal 1,000 pounds. She wanted to throw in the towel a dozen times, yet every single time she shut her eyes, she pictured Hams being ripped to shreds by the undead, hearing his laugh, replaying the feel of his face against her cheek, and remembering that brutal chop to her neck that both saved her life and shattered her heart. Failure was simply not an option. Time completely lost all meaning for her out there. Minutes blurred endlessly into what could have easily been hours. Only when Kayla finally called it did Lilia's exhausted system completely shut down. She dropped straight to the damp earth, with her wooden stick clattering right beside her, desperately gasping for air like she was drowning. Crouching low beside her, Kayla held out a water skin. How do you feel? Terrible. This is just the beginning though, bro. A true warrior needs a tough body and a dead-ass relentless will. You actually survived tonight, okay? At least you didn't throw a fit or beg to quit. Your physical form is way too weak with absolute zero foundation. Starting tomorrow, we are up before dawn for 20 laps around camp, followed by 500 stick swings before you touch any breakfast. Snatching the skin, Lilia drank down long, deep gulps. The ice-cold liquid slammed into her empty stomach, instantly snapping her foggy brain back. Why are you helping me? Really? Kayla averted her gaze toward the pitch-black tree-line. Like I told you, because of Hams. That total idiot lived like a coward, but at the very end, he finally stepped up and acted like a man. And besides, her voice shifted with a raw edge. I literally see myself in you, the old me back when not a single soul offered to show me the ropes. I had to claw my way out of a pile of corpses, clutching a rusty knife and figuring everything out solo. I don't want to watch you walk down that same toxic road, though since you're dead set on choosing it anyway. I'll at least make sure you go out with some dignity. Stretched flat on the freezing mud, Lilia lay still and stared up at the dark sky through fractured branches. Every single muscle in her frame screamed, yet internally, she felt eerie and absolute calm. That old Lilia, who once lived safely inside Iron Fortress, who spent her days polishing picture frames and cooking dinner for her night. That woman was officially dead today. What remained in her place was a completely different entity, built entirely for one purpose. Closing her tired eyes, she replayed the combat stance in her mind on an endless loop. Center of gravity, arm alignment, target lock. She was going to burn those movements into her flesh until they became pure, unthinking muscle memory. Miles away, I was lounging on my brand new throne inside Iron Fortress, watching my elite mages construct a highway at magical warp speed, totally oblivious to the fact that some random woman I'd never even met was grinding away in a dark forest, strictly to hum me down and end my life. Life keeps moving forward, even when you're completely checked out. And sometimes the sneakiest threats out there are the ones completely off your radar. Though honestly, that's a problem for future me to stress over. Right now, Prezemi made booth set up shop way, out of my hair in some spot where I had absolutely zero clue what was going down while low-key drama was brewing inside the imperial capital. Emperor Audrey V was posted up on a cold stone throne, amidst thick clouds of incense, as he listened to his royal seer drop the absolute worst bombshell a father could ever stomach. Your Majesty, I have witnessed a prophecy that is set in stone. Your only daughter and most cherished princess is going to take your life with her own two hands. Most kings would have had that prophet executed right then and there, or thrown the princess in lockdown, or at the very least thrown a minor freakout. Audrey didn't even flinch as the vision unfolded. Night falls. She grips a sword with the tip locked right on your chest. Meanwhile, your queen and your most trusted guard are standing right outside, catching every word. Neither of them steps in, proving this isn't just a rogue hit. It's a green-lit assassination. His own wife and bodyguard would actually allow it, which implied future him must have turned so toxic that the people closest to him would rather back his daughter's blade than let him keep the crown. Without a word, Audrey rose to his feet and strolled away, refusing to look back or question it further. As he paced through the palace halls, guards snapped salutes and maids hit the deck. He completely ghosted all of them, striding steadily through alternating stripes of sunlight and shade, his heavy royal garments flashing between brilliant gold and shadow. He tracked the sound of youthful giggles all the way to the courtyard garden. There she was, his 14-year-old kid, thrashing a smooth wooden branch around like an absolute menace, devoid of any proper form or technique, fueled entirely by pure, chaotic energy with sweat-drenched golden locks glued to her face. A panicked maid was scrambling desperately to pull the plug. Princess, please stop this. His Majesty strictly bans these shenanigans. If he catches us, relax. I'm literally not stressed. Father loves me way too much. The maid suddenly spotted Audrey first, turned completely ghost white, and dropped straight to her knees. The princess froze dead in her tracks with the stick still gripped tight, wearing that classic panic-stricken look of a kid, dead to rights, caught breaking the rules. As Audrey stepped closer, his towering shadow completely draped over his little girl. A calloused hand reached out toward her face. She squeezed her eyes tightly shut, bracing herself for a harsh scold. A sudden warmth, and a dry hand landed softly on the crown of her head, ruffling her locks. What do you want to learn? One eye cracked open suspiciously, greeted by zero anger on his face. The second eye flew wide open in pure shock, followed by the biggest grin ever. I want to learn SWORDSNSHIP, like real swords, so I can protect everyone and protect you, Father. Audrey stared deep into her eyes, finding pure joy and absolute innocence. The very eyes of a kid who literally couldn't even fathom wanting to hurt him. All right, starting tomorrow, you'll train under our place. Her eyes shot wide open like saucers. Seriously, or place? The actual commander of the Royal Knight Order? I get to train with him? Go, I promised. Thank you, Father. She tossed the stick at the startled maid, bounced off like a hyperactive baby deer, and sprinted away yelling. I'm telling Mother the good news. The royal garden fell dead silent. The creepy diviner was lurking in the dark shadows of the gate. Because of course he was. You know, my prophecies are never wrong, so you're literally handing a lethal weapon to the exact person who's going to off you. You won't stop it? Won't change it. Audrey marched straight toward him with slow, steady paces. Why on earth would I stop it? He came to a halt right in front of the hooded creep. I'm going to give her the absolute best education, the happiest childhood, and the most proper royal upbringing possible. I will teach her honor, heavy responsibility, and what it truly means to rule as an emperor. I'm going to forge her into an elite princess and a genuinely worthy heir. His gaze shifted toward the gleaming capital skyline. If after being handed all of that privilege, she still grabs a sword and aims it straight for my heart, then it can only mean one thing. I, Audrey V, have turned into a toxic tyrant, who totally deserves a brutal end, a worthy heir executing a fallen king. Now, that is the ultimate correct outcome. Why would I ever block the rightful path of fate from playing out? The cryptic diviner fell dead silent for a long moment. You really are? The weirdest king I've ever crossed paths with, perhaps. Audrey turned and walked away, ordering a nearby guard to summon Ortlace right this instant. Later on, inside the war room, a massive tactical terrain map stretched across the central wooden table. Portlace knelt low before his king, helmet off, revealing a hard-set jawline and strands of iron-gray hair. For an incredible 57 years, that veteran had been dedicated to serving the crown. Ever since Audrey was just a prince, Tyr's Sixth Knight had held his ground, recognized as the most lethal powerhouse across the entire empire. Starting tomorrow, all responsibilities of the Knight Order must be handed straight to your vice commander. With a puzzled look etched on his face, Ortlace asked, "Sire?" Despite gearing up for the impending clash with the theocracy, the emperor replied, "Your new assignment is teaching the princess." At those unexpected words, Ortlace completely froze up. "You will teach her everything you know, from advanced combat techniques to frontline battlefield experience and a deep understanding of the sword, holding nothing back whatsoever." Throughout the entire history of the kingdom, never once had a princess been trained in lethal combat arts. Princesses traditionally learned etiquette, art, and history instead of how to take a life. With all due respect, Your Majesty, royalty are born to high status, and razor-sharp blades are completely merciless. Let me make it clear, Ortlace, this is a direct order. Reaching down over the detailed terrain map, Audrey casually picked up a golden chess piece shaped like a king. I need her to master much more than just swinging a basic sword, because she needs to learn what it truly takes to become a real ruler, and when necessary, how to judge one. A sudden jolt went through Ortlace's rigid body as something finally clicked, or at least he felt like he almost got it. Either way, he wisely decided to drop any further questions. "Yes, Your Majesty," he murmured, bowing deeply, before strapping on his heavy helmet and exiting the chamber, left entirely by himself in the quiet hall. Audrey absent-mindedly rolled the golden king piece between his fingers. He set it back down precisely at the capital, before reaching out with a single finger and giving a light push. The tiny golden monarch immediately toppled over, tumbling wildly across the sandy map. Without uttering a single word, Audrey kept his eyes locked on the fallen piece for ages. Meanwhile, I was completely out of the loop regarding any of this drama, totally caught up in designing aesthetic toll booths, and low-key arguing with greed about the feasibility of a hot spring. Yet somewhere deep inside the imperial capital, an emperor just got hit with a prophecy that his own daughter is destined to take him out, and his ultimate reaction was to hire the nation's apex killer, to train her how to execute the job like a pro. Honestly, that has got to be either the most unhinged or the absolute most genius parenting flex I have ever witnessed in my entire life. If I ever cross paths with this Audrey V, I'm pretty sure we'd have a ton to unpack together. You've got one king who is actively setting up his own replacement, and one immortal skeleton who is literally irreplaceable. Things are getting wilder out here every single day, not gonna lie. 2 solid weeks of laying down asphalt roads later, I stumbled upon a pretty insane Easter egg. Every single one of my skeletons had hit tier 3, and, I mean all of them, not just the fighters. Even the farmers and the builders leveled up, despite their biggest showdowns only being against runaway potatoes. Turns out hard manual labor counts as legit XP grinding. Whether it is planting crops or hammering hot iron, stacking heavy logs actually triggers full-on evolution. Doing basic chores somehow got my construction crew promoted. This has got to be the most overtuned RPG system ever coded. Anyway, the highway project was finally finished with the last stone secured, and the final segment locked in. An invisible illusion barrier shimmered smoothly overhead in the dim light, with 400 battle mages standing frozen behind me like stone monuments. Amidst the heavy silence, I projected my consciousness deep into the valley, base to scope things out before physically stepping foot inside. Man, I seriously regret looking because the very first sight greeting me was a skeleton chilling peacefully inside a planting hole yet again. Is this the same guy, or just another random weirdo? Honestly, at this point they all do it, with his arms folded neatly across his chest, and adjusting his pelvic bones to catch maximum comfort. Buck the farmer was losing his absolute mind, screaming stop lying down in there. Those are wheat seeds, dude. Even if you bury yourself down in the dirt, bro, you are not going to sprout a litter of baby skeletons. Come next spring. The skeleton casually scratched his exposed thigh bone and replied, "So what? Like seriously, the audacity was unreal," while nearby Buck was wrestling. Another chaotic squad of skeletons. Over a sack of sprouted seed potatoes. They were actually trying to boil them, prompting me to yell, "Stop, those are seed potatoes. If you cook those things, they are totally dead." The head skeleton tilted his skull with completely flawless logic, arguing that food ought to be cooked, so if we cook the seeds ahead of time, then whenever we dig them back up later, they will already be cooked with 0 extra steps required. Talk about peak efficiency, because I honestly cannot even argue with that mindset. Sure, it is completely wrong, yet I cannot spot a single flaw in his reasoning. Mostly because there is no actual reasoning here, just pure, weaponized stupidity. Meanwhile, the local blacksmith shop was somehow even worse. Paul, the master blacksmith, was hollering like a guy watching his entire house burn down to ashes. Just use the tongs, grab the freaking tongs. Do not pick up glowing red-hot iron with your bare fingers, man. As one foolish skeleton apprentice was firmly gripping a superheated iron ingot with his bare hand, using nothing but his bare finger bones to hit it directly. A wet stone was being used by another one to grind down the anvil. Not even a sword, but literally the anvil itself. An actual weapon was what he tried to turn that anvil into. And to make things even crazier, the worst of the bunch, a skeleton had shoved his very own hand right down into the blazing forge fire, pulling it back out just to inspect the color of his bones, before shoving it right back into the flames. His own skeletal structure was literally being used as a thermometer. Where did my life completely go off the rails? Shouted Paul at the top of his lungs toward the ceiling. Back at the Royal Academy, man. My 2 professors, Roy and Rosen, were just stretched out across a giant animal pelt, totally flexing and comparing whose glutes were bigger while cracking up like absolute fools because they had finally reached total peace with their ridiculous reality. Down on the dirt, the elderly village chief was busy grinding out push-ups, shouting hype words about hardcore rehab training, all while keeping his eyes fixed on a skeleton that was trying to plant itself into the dirt for the millionth time. Seriously, enough is enough.